Hi, May. Good morning.
Good morning, Simon. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Good. It looks like we have an amazing conference coming up, right?
Yeah, I'm excited. I have been learning so much about startups the past few weeks preparing for this, and I'm really excited to learn from the professionals, really.
Mhm. All right. And just in case everyone is wondering that there's a change in people, right? So right now, everyone's watching. We are at the backstage, right? We're going to chit chat about what's coming in the conference. We're going to talk about speakers. We're going to talk about how things are going on. So, May, where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining from a northern suburb of Philadelphia, and
Mhm.
we have been hit by some hurricane rain the past few weeks, so it's been a dreary week on the Northeast, and we have not seen the sun. So, this conference is, I've been looking forward to it a lot. The most exciting
Mhm.
part of my week.
All right. So, and I'm joining from India where we get to see sun almost the entire day. We have not hit by storm. Winter is coming here. Not like the way you have in United States, but it's 7:30 p.m. at my place. So everyone who is joining us today, let us know which location you are joining and drop your location in the comments and let's join the conversation. And May, looks like we have been doing a lot of conferences and live shows in the past. I remember the recent one that we did was a .NET virtual conference, right? We had almost like 18, 20 speakers. That was amazing. And we have an amazing conference and speakers lineup for this conference too. What are your thoughts? And when it says startups, right, do you ever plan to build your own startup?
You know, I'd be lying if I said I've never thought of like having a great idea or like, oh, wouldn't this be cool?
Mhm.
But like, the stats show so many startups don't work out because people just don't know where to
Mhm.
start or where to go. So yeah, I've definitely had some great ideas. So how about you, Simon?
I mean, I did a lot of them, but none of them worked out. Some of them I quit very soon, and sometimes you are quite immature to do that. So I'm really looking forward for this conference. We have amazing speakers lined up. We're going to talk about how to protect your idea and all that stuff. So let's see. Pascal says excited and he's looking forward to it. So thank you everyone who is joining us today. This is the conference backstage. Me and May will be joining after every session, right? This is how it's gonna go. We're gonna have Mahesh next, who's gonna do the keynote, right? And after every session ends, me and May will walk into the live broadcast conference, and we're gonna talk about how are things going on, how the session went, and just keep the chat very interactive. Let us know if you have any questions coming. Put it into the comment section, and hi, John. Welcome to the conference. Thanks for joining us again. He's someone who regularly attends our live shows. So thank you so much. So, May, I think it's time to go ahead and invite our first speaker, who is none other than Mahesh. All right.
Yes.
Good morning. It looks like you guys are gone. Simon and May, you both are gone. Um,
We can drop in anytime
you
you
are?
want.
Okay. How's it going, guys? How's everybody?
Good, good. How are you today, Mahesh?
Good, good. How's everything there, Simon? Looks like COVID cases are growing again in India, same here in US.
Yeah, and the fun fact is there's no lockdown. The earlier time we had lockdowns, government were very serious about it. Now there's no lockdown. It's all up to the citizens. Put up a mask, maintain social distance. That's all we can say.
We're kind of
Yeah,
in the same boat here.
yeah, we are pretty tough. Like cases yesterday, we hit the highest cases, right? 80 some thousand. In East US, it's like still we have like 1,000 people, close to 1,000 people dying every day, which is pretty sad, and we don't know the how the winter is going to look like. Um, and now we have election coming up. Election should be done in at least few, and this 4 or 5 days, at least one thing will be done. Um,
So just go and vote, right? Go
Yeah.
and vote.
But in
Yeah.
the meantime, we need to keep ourselves busy. We need to keep everybody else busy and see how we can even continue people to motivate during this time. Is my sound low? We see a comment. My volume is low.
It's okay. I mean, it's a low and high is a comparative term, right? So it's might be because they're comparing with our voices, but it's okay.
All right. I can turn it up a little bit. All right, guys. So let's get this going. I'm
Mhm.
excited to start this conference.
All right.
So I think you guys should get out of here. So let me do my job here.
All right. It's all you. Now.
All
Next
right.
30 minutes, it's all you. I'll put up your presentation and see you soon.
All right. Let's get this going. Like, good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Mahesh Chan, and today we are here at Global Startup Virtual Conference presented by C Sharp Corner 2020 and Mindcracker. If you are new to these our conferences, C Sharp Corner is a global community of millions of developers. We do these conferences almost every month. And today, all we are going to talk about my most favorite topic, startups. Who this conference is for? If you are someone who wants to start your own startup, or you have been a part of startup, or you are a founder, co-founder, or even a team member in a startup, um, or you are a student and your entrepreneurship, you're doing your course in entrepreneurship, this conference is for you. um, in this Again, one thing I really want to explain here is that during these times, like where you COVID, for example, even I know we are all stuck at home during COVID times, and we're not traveling, we're not going out eating, we are not do celebrating birthday parties or other celebrations. So what happens is now all of us has more time in our hands, and as a growth mindset, or you're always thinking how you can best utilize your time, and this is maybe some time you want to spend some time thinking about which you are thinking, maybe have your own startup. This may be the right time for that. And if you look at the history, most a lot of successful startups, they started during bad times, so maybe this is some time, something to think about. Now let me go to my next screen. What we are going to do today in this conference with Simon and May, I am going to be your host for the conference today after the keynote. As you can see from this agenda, at 15 minutes we're going to talk about the big idea. Big idea means really what is your idea and how do you actually validate it. Make sure that I know there's no guarantee that any startup is going to be successful, but at least before you go all in, before you put all your time and money and energy in it, you need to at least somehow a little bit validate your idea, that is there something you're already planning to do does make sense. Is it really has some legs to it, right? Do people believe in it? Or sometimes you think your idea is the unique idea. Some people may already have it. There may be already several startups already doing, or companies already doing what you're trying to do. Then we're going to bring two experts in how to protect your startup. In that, we're going to talk about registration of your companies, your trademarks, NDAs, intellectual protection of intellectual properties, and so on and so forth. So let me emphasize one more time, guys. This conference is for you. This conference is for anybody who's interested in starting your own startup. So goal really is to make sure we answer your questions. So any questions you have anytime, feel free to post in comment section. And we are going to take those questions based on the topic we are covering in each session. But feel free, don't be shy about asking any questions. Can be any questions. Questions can be about your company, your legal, your startup, raising funds, and about building a team, and about a product and launch and market. uh, so then after our 10:45 session, we are going to talk about how to build a product and build most well, minimum viable product, which is the one product you want to launch to certain number of people. And then how do you take a test drive to make sure it's working before you really go and launch it publicly. Then we have afternoon, afternoon we have two sessions on, how do you raise funds. So we have experts going to join us, talk about investments. And then we have, in the last session, we're going to talk about marketing. How do you build a successful go-to-market strategy? In the end, we will do is there's going to be a panel discussion again. In the end, we're going to have experts there on the panel, and that's where we are going to talk about different parts of startups, how to make it success and failure, and so on and so forth. And also, you can ask any kind of questions. Again, this conference is for you. It's not for me. It's not for speakers, right? We are here just to support you. And so make sure you ask your questions. So at least by the time you're done, and after these 4 hours, next 4 hours, you should at least feel like you learned something today. Not only learned something, the questions you had on your mind, they got answered. So guys, welcome again. Welcome to the Global Startup Virtual Conference presented by C Sharp Corner. So we just cover our a little bit background. If you are new to C Sharp Corner, my name is Mahesh Chan. I'm founder of C Sharp Corner. I also run a company called MindCracker. MindCracker Inc. is a local Philadelphia-based software consulting firm. And I'm a former Microsoft regional director, 14 times Microsoft MVP, and so on and so forth. You can always find me on C Sharp Corner. I am frequent writer, contributor on C Sharp Corner. If you don't know much about me, I have been involved in a startup for many years. As a matter of fact, when I just graduated, a year later or two, I started a couple of my own startups. So these are some of the companies I have been involved, but there's 20 more companies I've been involved. This is just a list of companies. So point I'm making is that I have been, in last 20 years, I have been gone through a ton of startup work. I've started my own startups, and then I am advisor on several startups. I have been partner in several startups. I'm also have invested in some startups. So if you think of, I've been help marketing startups, as a matter of fact. So if you look at the whole life cycle of a startup, from an idea to launch, I have been involved all part of these all phases of a startup. If you look at from life cycle of a startup. So what I learned during these startups, like I also learned so many things, and which is very important, that and as you can see from the screen, that 9 out of 10 startups fail, and that's a fact, and even more, right? Some even if you look at some of the data that says that if you look at the really successful startup, there's only 3%. Forget even 9 out of 10, I'm saying 3%. So if there are 100 startups starting, only 3 are really successful. So it's very challenging to take an idea and build into a very successful, profitable business, right? And that's what really we are here to talk about today, is really going to bring all these topics, like when you are building a product and you have an idea and you want to build a product, how do you make sure at least that it's going to be successful? And that's exactly what we are going to talk about today. Other factors really is that startups with 2 founders are more successful than single founder, and the reason for that is very simple, right? When I say startup is not just a something where you just do it, right? It's a long journey. It could be a if you look at the history of any startup, you can look at the Facebook, Google, Twitter, or even go back like Microsoft, Apple, and so on. All these companies, when they started, it took a while them to become successful. They were not successful overnight. And now, but things in the past 5 years have been changed so fast that you have to really move fast. You don't even have that kind of time these days because there's so many companies, so many startups are starting, and they all have same idea. They all have same idea because they're trying to solve almost same problem. Now the idea could be a little bit unique here and there, but pretty much, and there is a fact, scientific fact is that anything you are thinking right now, there are 6 people in this world, maybe from different countries, different places, different languages, are thinking exactly same. Okay, so forget about the startups. And I'll give you one idea, right? And I have so many stories to tell you during this, my startup world is, I have friend and his son plays, with me. My son's, we play, we hang out. His son is the same as my son, and we go to basketball game and so on. I know this friend for many years, maybe 10 plus years. He keeps saying for several years, Mahesh, I have an idea, I have an idea, I have an idea. Like, but I don't want to share my idea with anybody because I know somebody's gonna steal my idea. This happens often, right? People think that they have this unique idea, they have the greatest idea, and somebody's going to just go and steal it. And then, so let me tell you one thing here. First of all, your idea is pretty much like your baby. If you are a parent, then you can probably relate it more. If you're not a parent, I will try to explain to you. Your idea is like, your car, your baby, right? Which means you are fully, this is your idea, you believe in it, you 100% really believe in it. But when it comes to other people, most cases, they don't care. Okay? People don't care. It's your idea, right? They have their own ideas. Everybody has their own ideas. Okay? So if you're thinking that you're going to share your idea with somebody and they're going to steal it, that's not going to work. Nobody cares. Even, I'm in New York one time. I'm in New York and I'm in a cab. The cab guy said he has 6 ideas, right? So point I'm making is that if you have an idea, you want to really discuss with somebody, and don't take like 6 years to discuss it. I have another friend. He had this great idea which was similar to some of the most popular companies now. It was, 10 years ago he started talking about this idea, but he never did anything. So another point I'm making here is if you have an idea, don't just talk about it. If you're really vested in it, you really believe in it, and you really want to do your own startup, you gotta just do something with it. Okay? And there'll be time where you say, you know what, I don't have resource, I don't have time, I don't even know how to do it. That's where you can find more people, you can find partners, you can find companies, you can find consultant. Depends on where you are in your life. If you don't have any money, try to find a co-founder, right? Co-founder then can even help you. Try to find, and that's what we're going to talk about more in this conference, throughout the conference. And when you're looking for a co-founder, try to find somebody who can complement. And when I say complement, I often see that a startup is started by 3 friends, 4 friends, they all write code. Startup is more than just writing a code. A startup is more than just building an app. A startup is more than just building a product. Startup needs more than that. A startup needs, somebody who can build the product, somebody who can market the product, somebody who can sell the product, somebody who can do operations, somebody can even also think about how to grow it. So it's more than just building a product. So if you are somebody new, young, and want to start your own company, or you say, you know what, I have this great idea, I know how can go to the customers, but I don't know who can build it for me. So maybe that's where you want to go and find a co-founder who can build the product. If your background is technical, if you are a programmer, you know how to build an app, it's a great idea, you believe in it, then maybe you need to find a co-founder who can help you from marketing and sales side. Somebody who has done business before, somebody knows how to take from A to B, somebody who can really take what you build to the market. So you need to think about in those terms. So that's what I really mean is that startups who have more co-founders are likely to be more successful. The one thing you want to be careful is when you are picking those co-founders, make sure you complement each other rather than everybody having same skill set. Other problem I note, during my experience working with the startups, or me being also part of startups, if more than one person has same skill set, for example, there are four guys building product, in most cases there's conflicts because all of us has different we want to build a product different ways. So if you, which is good and bad sometimes, so you have to be careful with that. But point I'm making is you definitely want to complement. If you're trying to just start with few friends, make sure they have different skill sets. And in the beginning, if you look at my numbers here, most of the successful startups are self-funded in the beginning. 82% startups, they are self-funded. Means money comes from the founders, or some their own money, or somehow they get from family. That's how really they start. So I know I talk to sometimes people, and this young guy, they have a startup, they'll come up and they'll say, you know what, I have this great idea, I have built a little bit here, but I'm really looking for somebody to fund my startup. Okay, then we have totally, nobody's really going to fund your idea right away. So you have to get to the next level, and that's where in our investment session today, we are going to all about funding, what kind of types of funding, how to get funding, how the valuation works, and so on and so forth. All right, I see we have more people joining us. Welcome to the show, guys. Everybody who's joining us. My name is Mahesh Chand. Today, you are joining us at the Startup Virtual Conference. What we are talking about today is all about startups. Who this conference is for? Somebody who wants to start his own startup, who wants to do his own company, or somebody who already has a startup. They want to just go to the next level. They want to raise money. They want to figure out how to build a growth market, how to build a go-to-market strategy, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a total 4 hours conference. So any questions, comments you guys have, feel free to post in comment section. Again, this conference is for you. We want to make sure you learn today a lot. You learn any questions you have about startups. So let me go back to my point I made on the previous screen, is that 9 out of 10 startups fail. And why do they fail? This is some of the research. It's not me saying here. It's some of the research as done by companies, and that's what they're saying. One of the biggest reason is that the reason startups fail is there's no market need. Means you think it's a great idea, you think everybody wants it, but in fact this market doesn't want it. People don't want it. So that's why it's very important to validate your idea before you go and spend your lot of time and money and energy in it. Don't just go jump around, say, you know what, okay, I have money, I'm going to hire a team, I'm going to start building product, I'm going to start marketing it. Don't even start that. First you need to make sure that you validate your idea. And that's where my next session is. I'm going to talk about is how do you validate your idea. Then second problem startups really they fail is that they run out of cash. They are unable to raise money. And this is one of the biggest reason I've seen again and again and again. Let me tell you, friends, some fact here. I've been part of probably 30 startups in past 15-20 years. Out of 30, I would say 25 have clearly failed. If not 25, 22 definitely shut down in their first one to 2 years. And one of the major reason was we were unable to raise cash, fund for the company. We were unable to get investment. So this is not just a point here. This is a very important point here, is that when you are trying to build your team or trying to find a co-founder, it's not a bad idea to get somebody on board as a co-founder or a team member, that who has experience with raising funds, finances, and so on and so forth. Sometimes you may also want to need an advisor. Advisors play a major role in startups. There are some companies and some people who are successful. They know startups in different capacity, right? Some of them help you with marketing, some do with the fundraising, some with you finances, so on and so forth. So it's not a bad idea to have a co-founder or an advisor on your startup who can help you raise money. That's important part. Without money, it's you can do nothing pretty much. You cannot hire more people, you cannot build a product, you cannot go to market. All those things, all those parts of a startup, they need money. Then not the right team is another point. You may have a team, but in the beginning is great, but then it doesn't work out. That's another reason startups fail. As I mentioned again, team is very important, right? When it's a startup is a journey. As I said, a startup is not just it's not a project where you know exactly what you're doing. Startup, sometimes you think it's a great idea, but you don't know. You have to move it, you have to pivot, you have to change things. So during that time, you need a team who can support you, not only you, each other, right? So a startup is journey. You are going through a long ride here. It's not just a 1 month or 2 months. It's usually years. Minimum 1 year, minimum 2 years, and then even more. So having the right team is a big, um, big reason startups fail or they're successful. Some people are more motivated, some are less motivated. They used to make sure the guys you have in the team, they are at least have similar mindset. They have energy and passion you do. That will help you take your startup to the next stage. And then after that, let's say you have you have validated, you have a marketing need, you also raise fund, or you will be able to raise fund when you need them, you also have a right team. Then startups next point is they're not innovative enough. And what does that mean is, if you look at the history of any company, look at the Apple, right? Apple was failed company until they started iPod and music business. When they started iPod, that was really when they became more innovative. But before that, and if you compare now Apple with other companies like Microsoft and Nokia and so many other companies, a lot of these companies had the similar products, right? They had their own phones, they had their own touch screen, they had music services, and so on and so forth. They were just not innovative enough. Somewhat, as a matter of fact, we were way ahead of Apple, to be frankly. I remember when Microsoft launched their touch screen laptop, which was similar to iPad. It was like, I remember 2001 I had it. 2000 I had it. I own a laptop called tablet. Microsoft called it a Microsoft tablet. It was a touch screen. It was a ink and pen. But they were not innovative enough. iPad was totally different. When Apple launched iPad, it was innovative. It was designed for customers who can just carry it around wherever they need it. It was for moms or dads who are going to soccer or basketball games. They can carry it with themselves. So innovation is again big part of that. And innovation is very important for a startup, because if there's other similar startup is doing it, and when it comes to competition, innovation then helps to basically lead the way. You are ahead of everybody. Then that, if you even look at today, there's so many companies building almost same thing, same similar products, same services. Only few of them are successful because they are ahead of everybody. So think of that when you are still thinking up. Welcome everybody. I see a lot more people joining us. Dave has joined us from California. Naveen, Stephen is already part of the team here. Welcome everybody to this Startup conference. We are going through the keynote. It's a welcome note, and we're talking about startups. Before you even start your own company, spend too much, what are the some things you need to think about. Other reason startup can fail is you have a poor product and lack of business model. That often happens. That in this, I have personally worked with a couple of startups in early days where they had this fantastic idea, but the product they built was not good enough to, when we gave it was working fine for few customers, but it was launched to public, and when thousands of people joined, product crashed. Their website crashed. Their app crashed. So these days, if your product is not good, it's not doing what it's supposed to do, it's not modern, it's not innovative, it's not simple, people don't have patience, okay? They don't have patience unless you have this unique idea where nobody has it and companies and businesses really need it or people really need it, that's a different story. But you cannot have a poor product in today's world. Make sure your product is done right. um, and then you have to have a business model. Some guy, they start the companies but they don't have business model, or they are unable to change to the business model that works. And then last point I'm making here is the poor marketing is another reason companies fail. And this I have, again, a lot of these experience I'm talking, a lot of these points I'm talking about, even also my personal experience. We have this awesome product. We had a marketing need. We just were unable to do a right marketing. If we were doing marketing, we spent a lot of money. We were even doing in different areas where that customers weren't even there. So that could again lead to failure of your startup. And then all these points we are going to cover in more details when we have our expert panels come in and join us. I think still good on time. We still have a few more minutes to go. So let's talk about my. I think this is my last slide for this, and then I have one more after this. These are some of the top 5 reasons. They're my favorite, and that they are my favorite because these are the one I see all the time, again and again and again. And keep in mind, I'm still working with startups. I'm still part of several, new startups. Each year I get involved in startups. I help them in different regions, different capacity. So these are some of the points are my hand-picked points where I see this again and again. So let's talk about this. Startups, founders making their startup as a second priority. This is my number one point. When you have a startup, it has to be your first priority. Otherwise, chances are it's not going to go far. Think of that startup, and my favorite point I make with when I speak at conferences about a startup is that startup is like your baby. If you are a parent, you would understand that. If you're not a parent, then I understand it's like your pet. It's like you have to give it a 24/7 attention. Okay, startup needs your 20% 24/7 time. It cannot be that when you are free or you are available, then you are working on a startup. It doesn't work that way. I see a lot of founders, they start the company, but they're still doing their own job. They're still going to, taking vacation. They're still doing all the things they do. It's very rare if a startup is going to be successful that way. If you are one of the founders, that's just more like a hobby. It's just side hobby for you. Don't call it a startup. Don't just make it like, oh, I'm building this awesome company. That becomes your hobby. Personally, that's what I think. So if you really want to do something and build something big, you have to be really 100% into it. Okay. This one, second point is choosing the wrong technology. That could also be a major reason. I've seen companies fail. I've seen a startup fail because they built an app, and app was done in the wrong technology, and now things change, and the startup was unable to quickly pivot from that. This happens all the time, that you build on a technology that's not scalable, and you go live in the public, then your website start crashing. It almost happened to actually Facebook when Facebook built their app and it was unable to scale. They ran into big challenges at that time, but they were able to fix problems, and they were quickly able to rebuild their website and launch it. But that happens a lot. So you gotta be careful what technology you pick before you really go all in there as a startup. And then definitely we talked about this point that when you're unable to raise funds, we ran through a lot of problems because either investors, if they were interested, first of all, some of the ideas they were not interested in, some of the startup they were not up there where they wanted to see, and some were said simply the valuation is too high. I'm still an advisor on companies where one company's valuation is just too high. It's a great idea, it's a great product, they have business model working, but the founder saying our company is worth 500 million, and investors, any investor you meet, that we cannot invest in this valuation. We want your it should be under 10 million or 100 million, whatever it is, but that could be another reason. um, but these days, if you want to raise money, I remember 10 years ago it was different. 10 years ago, if you have an idea and you could get money, say I want to build this app for this, you could raise money. But now most investors, they want to see that not only you have an idea, but you have built some kind of product, you have launched it, and some people are actually, you have few customers actually using it. That kind of becomes a proven model that your idea is working. So today, that's where you want to be before you go and talk to investors. Um, Again, we're going to have more this discussion in our detail in our investment session as well. Then, as we talked about, is if you are unable to build and execute a successful marketing strategy, that's another reason. We ran through these startups where we were unable to market and go to our audience and customers and sell them. We were unable to do that. Sometimes companies, if they are unable to pivot or change their business model, what they do, they may fail. And if you look at any successful company today, they pivot, they change, they evolve over time. Look at Amazon. Amazon started as a selling old used books. That's how Amazon started. Where you have an old book, you have used book, you want to sell it to, you just go put it online. That's how they started. Look at that today. Today they are the number one cloud company. So you have to pivot. Most startups, they are successful, they pivot. I have seen some startup founders, they are so stubborn, they're like, no, I don't want to change my model. Well, guess what? Sometimes you have to pivot to make it successful. So, all right, we have 5 more minutes to go before our next session. So if you guys have any questions, let them come, post them in comments. We are going to take these questions between 2 sessions, or after one session is done. So any kind of questions you have, make sure you ask, you post that in comment, because that's why we are here. Make sure during this pandemic, while we are doing all these conferences, we want to make sure you get some benefit out of it. So, oops, on the wrong slide. Let me quick go back to my last slide, and we are almost done. It's supposed to be break, but it's okay. We are running out of time. So we'll spend 5 minutes on this slide. And then we have our next session coming up from, it's on how to protect your startup. That's very important topic. I advise everybody who wants to start their own companies should attend that session. It's very important. So back to this, how do you validate your idea? Our first point is, if you have an idea of a startup, or you're planning to start a startup, or you already started it, maybe you are in very early stage. First thing I highly recommend is you kind of need to validate your big idea. And validate is very important. First of all, is your idea is unique? No. And I can say it doesn't have to be unique. Unique means at least at some point or certain, it has to have some more than what's already out there. Okay? So when you are building something, I'll give you again, let me go back to my discussion I was talking about my friend. He said, Mahesh, the friend I was talking about who has been telling me this idea for 10 years. He said, I have this idea, I want to build this app where, if you are alone, you're going out, you need a wingman. So how do you find the wingman? Then I just showed him right there, and I went to my iPhone, I went to the App Store, I searched it. There are like tons of apps are already there doing it. Okay, so if you think you have a great idea and it's very unique and it's better than others, what you need to do is, first you need to go and search what's already out there. And for example, if you're building an app, I don't know, maybe whatever, you're building a game, go check it out there. It's already there. If it is there, who is doing it? If there is a company that's a really big company that's doing same thing what you're doing, chances are, guess what? They have more money, they have more resources, they have more customers already. So you have to look at that. You cannot just say, oh, I have this great idea. You have to do research that. And chances are, in today's date, whatever you're thinking, it's probably already done. Okay? Now, doesn't mean that I'm demotivating you. You still have to go and see if you still want to do that, why your idea is better than others, or how can you move ahead of them, or how can you be, better market this, or how's your app or your product. Why, if let's say today I want to start my own Facebook, why would people who are already on Facebook for years would jump to my new app or website? That's how you have to think. What is that reason where one person will move from this place to this place? You have to give them a very compelling reason. That's how you have to think. You have to do next is feasibility analysis. Feasibility means you have to look at all aspects like time, money, team, resources. Is it feasible to even do that? Sometimes you may have this great idea, this could be the greatest idea, but building this idea will take you more than how much money you'll make it. So you have to look at the feasibility there, right? Now then you validate it. So you did all the research, you did feasibility analysis, you think, you know what, looks good, I have a better idea than others, I'm gonna still go with it. Then what now you need to do is validate it. Again, don't be afraid of sharing your idea. You can validate with friends, talk to close friends, the one first you can trust. So if you're afraid that somebody's gonna go and steal your idea, talk to your close friends. Like, hey, I want to build this app. Hey, I want to build this product. What do you think? They'll give you the right advice. Talk to family. Talk to co-workers. Try to find people who can really give you a true advice, who can criticize you, who can even tell you that's a great idea, but this is why it will not work because of me. Don't just listen to only people who are always supportive to you, because there are people like, if I go talk to you, say you go talk to your best friend, talk to your mom, they're always going to support you because that's what they do. So they're okay, but they are not the right people you want to validate your idea with. You want to validate with some people who can really give you right advice, who can criticize you, and who could also be your future potential customers. That's how you validate. Talk to them before you go there. So that's all it is. My time is running out, so now I'm going to take a break here, and let's invite Simon and May back for our session. And thank you so much. I'll be seeing you all day throughout next 4 hours.
All
Okay,
right.
guys, did you learn
Thank you.
something?
Yes, thank you, Mahesh. That was wonderful. I do think we have some questions for you. If
So
we have
questions,
time.
we can take this maybe after first session.
Mhm.
So
Of course.
because we are kind of running time, so what we should do is when session is done early, we will take some questions.
Awesome.
All right. I
Right?
think maybe it's time to go ahead and even invite our next speakers because I think we are very exactly on time.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
All right. So let's have our next speaker, Andrew and Tyler.
Hey Andrew, how are you?
Hey, Mahesh, doing well. How about yourself?
All good, all good. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the conference.
Thank you
Thank you
very
for
much.
being available. Hey Tyler, how are you?
Hey, doing well, Mahesh. Thanks for having us.
Definitely, definitely. No, thank you for helping us and being part of this. Um, how's everything going? I know you both are in Philadelphia. I'm not far from there.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. We're both like right down in the city, so lots
All
of
right.
here for sure.
All right, guys. So what I will do is, as you probably heard already, you guys go ahead with your sessions, start sharing the screen, and go ahead and jump in. And then if there is time, still have, in the end, we will do question and answers.
Perfect.
Great.
All right.
Sounds good.
I'll be.
All right, so I'm going to start the presentation that we have, and I just wanted to maybe give a quick brief overview. Tyler and myself, we both work for our law firm that We started a couple years back, and we're basically fintech lawyers that have a couple different specialties. And realistically, we've not only been a part of several startups, we've ran our own startups in the past, and we also do a lot of legal consulting for startups in a lot of different industries. And so the main objective here for this presentation is really to provide some insight and information to those who are taking on this leap into the startup space and really considering how to properly protect your startup, as well as how to structure it. And we're going to cover a lot of different topics. And so I'm going to kind of jump right into it. I'm going to do the first half, and then Tyler will do the second half, and then we'll open it up and we'll kind of have a panel and maybe a conversation, and we'll be open to questions and things along those lines. So first and foremost, just thinking about the startup in of itself is, let's conceptualize that you already have your idea, you know what your business is going to do in terms of functionality, but then what do? The very, very first consideration, a lot of times, is trying to figure out how to take that idea and really create a legitimate business. And so the first step is definitely entity formation. So choosing an entity for your business is extremely important and will also dictate not only the functionality of the business, but also the roles and responsibilities of the members within it. Mahesh made a great point about choosing your members and the individuals who are going to be a part of the business. And entity formation is really building up a large kind of robust structure around the relationship that you create with those individuals. So there are many different types of entity structures, and there's a lot of considerations. And especially early on, you want to make sure that you're properly considering the right entities, because it could potentially come back and be very important in terms of not only taking your business to either another level in terms of expansion, but also taking on other individuals and employees and investors and things along those lines. So the very, very high level overview of entities, especially here in the United States, is the sole proprietorship, the limited liability company, most common, the corporation, the partnership, and then the S corporation. So I'm going to kind of break down each one of these and talk about the considerations in terms of the perspective of the founder of the startup, and then really kind of just explain a couple key points from a legal standpoint and provide that legal advice that is so crucial in terms of considering which entity to go with. So the first one is a sole partnership, and this one is at the very, very base level of entity formation, because it technically, in a lot of states, doesn't even require you to provide any filings to the state. It's one of the only entities that this is not a requirement. And so as a result, there's really no formal action. But there are specific considerations, the most important being that it can only be operated and owned by one individual. And so there's no distinction between you as the individual and the business. And a lot of businesses will start off as a sole partnership. And it'll be the individual who owns it and started it. And maybe you're trying to get off the ground. Maybe you're just fleshing out your business plan, or you're trying to develop a website, or whatever it is in the early development of the process that you feel that you don't want to take that leap to one of the more legitimate entity structures. Also, it kind of depends on what business you're in, because there are examples of sole partnerships where it makes sense. Say if you're a freelancer, or if somebody is going to be hired as like an at-will employee or something along those lines, the person, they can kind of have this sole partnership. It's easy, there's really no expense, and also you have complete control over everything. And that's kind of one of the very, very like basic parts of it. One of the legal considerations and why maybe Tyler and myself aren't huge fans of sole partnerships is mostly because of liability. So if you conduct operations and you move forward with your business and you're maybe providing some service, let's just say you have a customer base and one of the customers is dissatisfied or feels that they were taken advantage of by your services. If they want to sue or bring a case against you, or say you don't pay your taxes for the company, your personal liabilities are at risk. And so the sole partnership doesn't really absolve you from liability for the risks that are accompanied by a business. And that's kind of why Tyler and myself aren't huge fans of this, because at the end of the day, you really want to take advantage of a lot of the entity structures that provide that liability protection. And as a result, you can conduct business in a manner that allows you to not constantly worry about your personal assets being potentially subject to risk. So very, very basic stuff about the tax consideration for sole partnership. And realistically, you basically just kind of follow a very, very standard report income and losses and expenses to the IRS, standard form 1040 and Schedule C. So I'm going to move on to the next one. And in my opinion, this is the most commonly used in our experience, not only in startups, but also early on developing businesses. And it's the limited liability company. Now, the limited liability company, as I'm indicating in this slide, it's kind of this hybrid legal structure where what I was talking about before in terms of your protection of your liability, it provides that. And it also has some features of the larger corporation entity structure. So there's some tax efficiencies and operations and things along those lines. And you're a member of the LLC, and you're not limited like you are in the sole partnership in that you can take on multiple members. Now, LLCs, again, they're flexible. They're used for many different operations. And a lot of times startups will actually create an LLC with the idea that at a later date, they are going to then convert into a corporation, which I'll get into in a minute. The LLC provides this flexibility and provides a protection of your assets and your personal liabilities. But however, unlike in a corporation, they're not taxed as a separate business entity. So from a tax perspective, it's different from a corporation and actually pretty similar to a sole partnership in that you are going to have these individual taxes. Now, sometimes depending on where you operate, like for example, say you operate in the city of Philadelphia and there's a city tax that is levied against the company, that's a consideration that you need to take on as a business. And ultimately, the partner, the members of the LLC will be filing their personal income taxes, and there will most likely be taxes that they owe on behalf of the LLC that they'll be paying through their personal income taxes. So instead, but all profits and losses are passed through. And that's basically kind of like a summarization of what I just said. It's passing through the entity into you and the other members of the LLC. Again, Tyler and myself really feel that the LLC is extremely flexible. We find that it can be very useful and easy to set up early on. And for example, I have this kind of like quick breakdown of how to form one. And really, you're choosing your business name, you're checking the state to make sure that someone else already doesn't have that entity name. And if it's available, then you can move forward with filing your articles of organization, which a lot of times lawyers do. We do this on behalf of startups. It's very easy. We've done it plenty of times. Also, some startups do it themselves. It's something that can be learned. It's just whether you have the time and whether you want to take on the individual risk. We are obviously self-serving in that we always advise people to use attorneys in terms of creating their entities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a blanket statement and that everyone should do it for the articles of organization. A lot of times it's simply filling out a form and submitting it to the State Department. So creating an operating agreement, once you have the articles of organization submitted, which is kind of the stamp of approval from the state, is really important. The operating agreement is going to detail the roles and responsibilities of all the members, functionality of the business, and then it's going to talk about very important aspects of the business. For example, if the business were to get sold or if the business were to dissolve, these are all considerations that really need to be codified in the articles of organization. So they're going to map out kind of the procedures of the business. Now, creating an operating agreement, there's plenty of templates on the internet, and I've had plenty of companies and startups that have come to me that have already created an operating agreement, and they took from that template. And 9 times out of 10, when it's very, very early on in development, that's not that big of a deal. However, once you start conducting operations and potentially expanding or taking on employees, that operating agreement needs to be more robust because it needs to account for the liabilities of the company as well as those roles and responsibilities of any incoming employees and or investors that are potentially investing in the business. Obtaining licensing and permits, this is something that's going to be industry specific and kind of depends on whatever your business is. So for example, if I am a fintech business that is going to launch a payment app similar to PayPal, I am going to need to get what's called a money transmitter license in the state that I offer services in. That is a state license that I have to apply for and ensure that my entity has before I can conduct operations. That's a high-level example of a license, and there are other ones that apply for other industries, but it just serves as an example of once you structure your entity, have the operating agreement in place, your articles of organization are filed, you may need to consider whether you have licensing or permit obligations, which is obviously something that your attorney will do for you, but it's also something you should definitely be cognizant of as the founder of the startup. So let's talk about positives and negatives. So I kind of covered the positives, and again, there's a lot of ability and flexibility for the business. And I just want to talk about two of the negative examples, which is the limited life. So if a member leaves, the business is dissolved, and the members must fulfill all remaining the legal obligations to close the business. This means that if there's debt or there's any obligations for a contract or finishing a contract that you can't get out of or can't cancel, you're going to need to make sure that you fulfill those obligations. And that's a little different from a corporation structure. Self-employment taxes are important as well, which is kind of a negative component to the LLC because everyone's considered self-employed for the members. And so they're paying their taxes towards Medicare and Social Security. You don't have a robust payment plan or really have an ability to offer a lot of benefits to employees. And so there's less of an incentive for an employee to come on from that perspective. However, again, from a developmental standpoint, it's really important to understand that an LLC could really serve in the early stage of development because you might not necessarily be taking on employees during that stage, and the conversion to a corporation might be beneficial at a later date when you're ready to make that next step. Corporations. So corporations from a high level are more respected by investors and VCs. That's just kind of a flat out understanding in the industry. And they also are used for more robust, complicated, for lack of a better term, businesses. So we're talking about a entity that is going to most likely have a board of directors that will make decisions. And then it'll have the lower level employees as well. And then obviously your CEO, CFO, COO, things like that. Like the members, of course, those exist in the LLC, but this is a much more robust structure in terms of not only the ability to create different classes of shares. So for example, if you want to allow investors to come in and invest in the company early on, the ability of a corporation to issue shares is a much more important consideration early on than it is in the LLC context. So the corporations really are reserved for kind of these more complex scenarios. And also the ability to really go public is another important consideration. Now that may be way off in the future and maybe you're still early on in your startup development, but it is a consideration and something you want to factor in, because at the end of the day, if your long-term goal is to really get to the public listing stage of a business, then a corporation, a C Corp specifically, might be the perfect entity for you early on. But again, there's funding considerations. It's typically more expensive to create a C Corp. There's more documentation that is affiliated with it. Also, tracking minutes and making sure that you're carrying out the procedures of the business are more important than in the LLC context. So we have some positive attributes here. Limited liability for sure. I mean, corporations, there's a concept called piercing the corporate veil, which is when somebody basically uses their own personal assets, for example, to conduct business operations. Then they might be potentially personally liable. But for the most part, when you have a corporation, you are keeping those things separate. And as a result, you are shielded from liability of the business itself. The ability to generate capital, and this is the one that we really harp on for startups as much as possible. C Corps, again, going back to what I said, I'm just going to repeat it. They are just considered more legitimate from an investor standpoint. So you're going to be able to attract investors more most likely. Again, it's industry specific, but VCs, for example, are very much going to give larger consideration to a C Corp than they would an LLC. The corporate tax treatment is important as well. Corporations, they file taxes separately from their owners. And so it's separated, unlike in the LLC context where it's going to be a pass-through. And so that's one of the considerations as well in terms of structuring the entity. And then I mentioned this before, but attracting potential employees because you can give those benefits. S corporation is a specific type of corporation that's not the general C corp corporation. And again, this one is a little bit different because you just need to make sure that you can pass through the profits and losses through the personal tax return, but it's an additional application with the State Department that needs to be approved. And so it's not simply a filing in that you're creating an entity, it's more of a review process in that the State Department needs to review this and then approve it. And so again, my second bullet point, the IRS, S corps are considered by law to be a unique entity, separate and in terms of the apart from being from the individuals, but at the same time, the liability and responsibility for the owners or shareholders is going to be more limited than the C corp. And so this S corp a lot of times can be reserved for something that is more of an altruistic business that might not fully be a nonprofit, but also has something in regards to a portion of the business that is really trying to do good rather than having a purely capital focused entity. So positive attributes, again, there's not the double taxation that I was referencing before in the C corp. And so there's tax savings in that context. And then the business expense tax credits are really important. And we're obviously going to share this presentation so you'll be able to have all this information. Also, the independent life component. If the members leave and there are additional members that can come in, the business can continue to operate. And this happens a lot in the corporate context. Negative attributes, strict operational procedures and processes. Basically, in an LLC, you really have the flexibility to go out and maybe pivot and do different things. In the corporation context, you're going to have limitations in terms of making sure that everyone's on board, or maybe you need approval from the board of directors, depending on how the policies and procedures of the business are set up. So that's a component of the business that really has to kind of make sure that you're considering how flexible you want to be in terms of whatever your idea and industry is that you're entering into. Shareholder compensation requirements. So this is a really important one as well. LLCs have a lot of deference in terms of how they can issue profits. And in the corporate context, especially with S corporations and C corporations, you have these very specific requirements, and they must receive reasonable compensation. So the IRS looks at that with a very intent eye rather than they would with an LLC. A partnership is a single business where it's just two or more people. So the partnership is different from the LLC because the partners are contributing to all of the business, and they encompass kind of like multiple individuals, but it's not the sole partnership. And so it's a little different from the sole partnership as well as the LLC in terms of liability. Positives, it's super easy. Shared financial commitment means everyone's kind of on the same page in terms of development and progress. Some of the negatives are, again, the liability component. You're going to really want to focus in on LLCs and corporations if you're entering a startup that is going to potentially operate in a legitimate industry. You really want to stray away from sole partnerships and partnerships in general because of this joint individual liability. So I'm going to talk about NDAs and confidentiality and protection. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because a lot of times the way that this op functions is you'll have all of these documents in place for a startup, and it's extremely important to make sure that you're preserving your ideas and information, especially as you start to conduct operations. So an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. You are basically granting somebody the ability to receive your proprietary information about your business, and then they don't have the ability to then disseminate or distribute that information subsequently to anybody else. Basically, you can share with them, and then they can't go share with anybody else. A really important stage in a startup's process and timeline and life cycle is not only entering into contracts with third-party service providers, as well as communicating with investors. Those two scenarios are extremely important for a non-disclosure agreement. If you're entering into a potential contract with a third-party service provider that is going to do something in regards to whatever your platform is or business is, you're going to want to make sure that you have them signing this type of agreement beforehand. This can be baked into a contract as well. Because if you're agreeing to a contract, and maybe you have a software developer that's going to build out your website, or you have an online service provider or something along those lines, it's going to be really important to make sure that you have this NDA in place, either initially or in the contract, where you're going to start giving them proprietary information about your business. It's also extremely important to provide this to investors, definitely with VCs as well as funds that are potentially investing. Because if you're not using this type of protection, then that information can potentially get out. Now, this isn't necessarily important, like Mahesh pointed out early on, when you're talking to other people about your business. It's very unlikely, like he said, that people are going to go off and just take that information. But when you're entering into this investor context and you're having presentations with potential investors or communicating them with information about the business, maybe you're providing your prior financial history or operating expenses, that is all information that you just want to make sure that you're protecting. And the NDA really serves as a flexible document that protects that early on. Confidentiality, it comes in multiple different forms from a legal context. Again, this is a similar scenario to non-disclosure in that the confidentiality is protecting that information. And so these aren't full-on agreements. It typically either is a provision within your NDA or it's a provision within your contract that you're entering into with whomever the third-party business or entity or individual is. So you want to make sure that whoever your attorney is or whatever agreements you have in place, that they have these confidentiality provisions within them, especially in the IP context, which Tyler's going to get into in a little bit. Insurance. So this is going to be very industry dependent. For example, when I started my law firm, it's extremely important for lawyers to have insurance and liability insurance. So that was very much a priority from that perspective. However, that is going to be a different consideration depending on what your business is operating in. So a really good example is if you are a fintech payment application and you want to allow for users and businesses to be able to use your payment application, it's going to be extremely important for you to have insurance because you're dealing with flow of funds. If a merchant goes out and uses your service and they end up losing a significant amount of money, they're going to try to hold you responsible and most likely will file a case against you. Having insurance for that, or as well as potentially you having suffering losses of funds in the startup, is extremely important as well. So again, it's going to be very industry dependent, but even if you're running your startup at an early stage, it's something that you should definitely consider and potentially talk to an attorney about, because that insurance component could potentially make or break your business, especially early on. There have been so many entities and startups early on in their development that have never been able to get off the ground because they were just bombarded with legal cases or they were threatened with legal lawsuits. And you definitely don't want to take that on early on because it's going to not only be bad for the business, you're going to struggle to raise funds because VCs are pretty conservative in the way that they evaluate information. And they're going to make this decision just from that very basis that, oh, there's an inherent risk with this business. I'm not going to come in and risk funding it. So that's a really large consideration for sure. And something that this is after creating the entity, getting all of your operating and corporate governance documents in line, and then going out and making sure that you want to consider, oh, do I have hardware, for example, that I need to have insured? Or do I conduct operations that need specific insurance in some type of specific industry? Professional industries, so doctors, dentists, lawyers, psychologists, all of these individuals and businesses very much are at the focal point of insurance, but don't think that it's just categorically limited to those industries. It's very important for you to consider what your startup is doing and see if you need insurance early on. Cyber insurance. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but if you're conducting operations and if you're a fintech or if you're just like a technology-based startup and there's a lot of accessibility from an internet perspective, you're going to want to definitely take into consideration whether you need cyber insurance. I mean, there's computer forensics, privacy, security considerations, crisis management, your data loss. If you're taking on personal information of individuals and or businesses, and you're needing to protect them, you're most likely going to want to have cyber insurance. Because if you lose that information, then you're liable for that. And that can really make or break a business as well. So in terms of coverage, again, it is going to be industry specific, but there are a lot of policies out there and third-party insurance providers that provide these types of different plans. A lot of times it ultimately becomes a negotiation. This is something you should talk with your representation about, because it's going to be that consideration of, okay, what industry am I in? What is my exact platform? How many jurisdictions is my website or internet service accessible in, which is another large consideration, because if you're just operating in one state or you're operating in 13 countries, you're going to have a much different consideration in terms of your cyber insurance. A lot of startups obviously aren't operating in the latter context in that many jurisdictions, but they ostensibly want to grow to get to that point. And as a result, they really want to make sure that they're considering insurance from that perspective. And I listed a couple examples at the bottom, which are really important. The cybercrime component, theft or loss of hardware, also software as well, hacking, regulatory actions, things along those lines are all definitely extremely important in terms of insurance. So that is the end of my portion of the presentation. I'm going to let Tyler take on the rest of it, and then we're going to open it up and have a discussion about some of the services that we really think are important for startups, as well as just general questions about these topics that we're covering.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Hey, guys, going to talk about intellectual property here. We're going to go till about 11:30, and we're going to leave some times for questions. So about this topic, I think it's kind of this section about your product. We're talking about your services. And I have this image here of some trade. This is all to say that intellectual property, big brands, it's how you get to be a big brand in the early stages of your businesses and setting up later on down the road. So we're going to talk about the copyright, trade secrets, trademark. They can overlap as far as confusing as far as what type of intellectual property and what you need to do to protect each type of intellectual property. And we'll talk about the roles of your intellectual property counsel. So it's like offensive to protect, and there's things that you have to do to.
Hey, Tyler, you're breaking up. It's just sound is not clear. Looks like your internet.
All right, he's breaking up. Well, he figures that out.
Can you click me through?
Yeah. So, Tyler, you're just breaking up if you want to check that out, which I can just cover the patent component right now. So
yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Yeah, and then he'll figure that out and hop on. So patents are a really important consideration for certain types of startups. And I think that patents should always be heavily weighed in terms of consideration before actually making the plunge into filing a patent application, because it's a robust process that requires a lot of information. Now, there are different types of patents that I've detailed here, and I'll get into in a second. But really, from a legal perspective, you want to make sure that whatever you're going to patent, one, can actually be patented. And then two, what is the likelihood that you're going to get granted a patent? There are too many times where businesses have come in and they don't provide enough information, or they don't allow for the proper evaluation of what it is they're trying to patent. And as a result, it gets denied. And then they've wasted all of these legal costs and time to try to get something protected that they actually couldn't have gotten protected in the first place. So that's a really, really strong consideration from early on. And the types of patents is really going to give us some insight into whether your information and business needs to have some element of patent or whatever it is that you're developing. So what is a patent, right? What is it protecting? It's just protecting the information around the invention, or maybe it's a discovery, or like prime examples obviously are machines and computer components and things along those lines. Medical devices is a really popular area that gets patented a lot. And then obviously it covers a lot of different technological areas. But ultimately, you are protecting the ability to use whatever it is that you've created. And so by creating and filing a patent, you are ultimately allowing yourself to make sure that someone isn't going out and taking your idea and the same exact concept and implementing it without you at least getting compensated, or even allowing them to do it in the first place. So when we talk about patents, the most important and most popular one is a utility patent. This is an invention patent, essentially. You're developing some type of process, machine, composition matter, or something along those lines that allows the owner, so you as the startup, to exclude these other individuals or businesses from doing the same thing and creating that same invention. So a really good example of this is I actually met a guy and helped him out with some legal work one time. He created a device for jet skis that doesn't allow jet skis to go above a certain speed. This was perfect in terms of a utility patent because he was creating an actual device that was going to be inserted into the manufacturing process of jet skis. And as a result, he wanted to file a patent that was going to protect that invention. So that is a really good kind of hardware example. And design or utility patents are really kind of primed for that. I want to take a moment and talk about, just a side note, is that a provisional patent is essentially a 1-year patent light, is what we like to call it. And basically, at the end of the day, it's your ability to file not nearly as much information that is required for a full patent, and then it's reserved in the USPTO office and database for 1 year. When that 1 year expires, you have the ability to file a full patent application, or you can just let it expire and then that's it. The protection's no longer there. Provisional patents are great for startups who are going to patent some type of invention or process that they've created. And there are a lot of considerations there. One is, in what stage of development are you in terms of creating the invention? If you are halfway through and it's not fully fleshed out, a provisional patent gives you that year time period to not only take the time to finish it out, create the invention, but also make sure that you have all the information for when you file the full patent application. So, for example, he thinks this is a great idea. It was. And he wants to make sure that, the timing of the market, like someone might come along and create this in this period of time that is going to allow me to finish out the invention. Provisional patent's perfect for that, and really kind of puts it on reserve in terms of allowing for the protection component of what a patent is. So a lot of times startups will do provisional patents and then do the full patent application, because patents can be costly from a legal perspective. They can cost a good amount of money depending on what type of invention and mechanism that you're actually creating. Let's talk about design patents. So this is a new, original, and ornamental design embodied in an article of manufacturing, and then allows you to really sell this design. So a lot of times there's software designs that can be really good examples for a design patent, that maybe it's creating some type of new design in an application, or maybe it is some type of new software coding development, like take Ruby on Rails or something like that, or something along those lines in terms of coding. And a design patent can be really helpful in terms of preserving that mechanism or design that you're creating, and then allowing obviously people to go out and access it. Because at the end of the day, you want to be able to monetize, especially as a business, the creation that you've put in place. And as a result, you want to make sure that you're properly designing this patent that reflects whatever design that you've created. Plant patents are by far the least common, and it's basically a new and distinct, invented or discovered, reproduced plant. So this is a very unique scenario, and I can't imagine we have too many people during this presentation that would even consider this type of patent. But if you do, it's available, and obviously a very, very specific type of patent.
I think there's only been 12 or 15 issued ever.
Yeah. Tyler, you're coming in clear. You want to take over?
Perfect. Yeah, just a little relocation. You want to go ahead to the next slide? I think I need you to click through.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so we got some examples of each type of patent. So as you'll see, the design patent is purely the application that you file is really going to be focused on the characteristics of the object that you're designing. And then the utility patent is going to lay out a process more so than the design patent. And then your plant patent, as we said, those are very rare. I think this is the original plant patent, or the first plant patent ever filed. It was for a rose variety back in the 80s, I think it was. And so we don't have too many of them, but these are just some examples so you can visualize what these patent applications look like when they're filed. They're very technical. There's a lot that goes into drafting these, so I wouldn't recommend doing it without help of an experienced patent counselor. It's very important to get it right because, as Andrew mentioned, it can be very expensive to go through the process, and you don't want to get all the way through the application process only to be denied. So we'll dive into copyright. Copyright is when you protect work of authorship, and the thing about copyright is you need what you're protecting to be in a form or medium of expression. So that means we're not protecting ideas, we're protecting actual expression of ideas. So art, music, literature, books, movies, anything you can think of that is actually expressed in medium. A website is copyrightable. And you'll see that often, 99% of the times, websites do have the copyright logo at the bottom of the site. And we're looking at, so generally it must be original. So it's independently created by one or more persons. What can happen is when two people work on a book or a movie, you're going to have a situation where there's co-authorship. And sometimes you can get into trouble with those situations if one person thinks that he or she owns more of the work than the other. So that's why it's important to have certain agreements in place, like a co-authorship agreement, so that you can determine from the outset who is entitled to what when you're working on something like this. It's a very collaborative process, usually when you're creating things like that are protected by copyright. And then we can have issues arise pertaining to authorship when we're dealing with works made for hire. So if you're an employer or if you're a consultant hired by someone, then you're going to have a contract that usually addresses, there's a section titled Works Made for Hire. And so this section is going to address the employer's rights as far as commissioning the work and stipulate that the employer or the person hiring the consultant is actually the owner of the work. So these are all types of issues that can arise or that are baked into contracts when we're dealing with copyright issues.
All right, that's great. Thanks, Tyler. So I think that what we're going to do is we want to make sure we open it up and give everyone an opportunity to kind of ask us some questions. So I'm actually going to get out of.
I think we got five more minutes now
for the. Should we go?
No, we have 5 minutes just for questions now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll be done this at 11:30. Sorry, that was a little confusion there.
No problem.
Great presentation. I think, guys, you covered pretty much what we were looking for. Keep in mind, this most users who are watching this are from software background, so that's great. And some are actually contributors. So I have a question about this. This last point you had about the copyright. A lot of guys who are joining us this conference, they work for a company either as a full-time employee, and I have seen some conflicts. So you want to explain a little bit, if I'm working as a full-time employee and I'm writing a code, who owns that code and what they can do or cannot do?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So oftentimes we see or we advocate for our clients to enter into employment contracts or consulting agreements with their personnel, which state that anything made by the employee or the consultant is actually ownership of the company. There's obviously sections that we provide in those documents that can exclude certain works. So if the company wants to allow the employee or consultant to moonlight and work on their own projects, that can certainly be dealt with in those agreements. So it's really going to be largely dictated by the agreement in place between the employer and the employee. If there is no agreement in place, then you're going to look at the law of the jurisdiction in which you're operating to determine what the rights of the employee are there for developing the software. And oftentimes, that employee developing the software is going to have an authorship right to that work that's being created.
Okay, so it looks like, so if you are a startup founder and you hire somebody to write your code, it's probably better to make sure you have that contract. It says that the startup will own all the rights to that code. An employee cannot go and take and use code somewhere else.
Exactly. And one of the basic things that we do for our startup clients when they're just getting formed and operating with new employees or consultants is we have them sign a confidentiality and assignment of inventions agreement, which essentially protects the company's intellectual property and anything developed by the consultant or employee in the process of working for the company.
So that's another good point, right? Confidentiality. What I have seen, and also some guys, they work for me or some companies, and they left and they started their own same thing. Can you spend a little bit time on maybe a minute just to explaining that there's a period of time you cannot just go and start your own same idea or company.
Sure. Andrew, do you want to take that?
For sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times courts in the states are reluctant to uphold kind of a prohibition against going off and doing your own thing if it's beyond 1 or 2 years. And so that's kind of like a blanket statement in terms of your limitations of going off and doing something else. And a lot of times it's going to be codified in whatever the contract is between the individual and the business itself. And so when people go out and create a similar business, you really want to make sure that you're relying back on whatever the documentation was that was solidified for you to even be in the relationship in the first place. So, and again, time and scope are the biggest considerations because the time, the 1 to 2 years, if it's beyond that, most likely won't be upheld. And then scope from a geographical standpoint is another very large consideration, especially in the technology world, right? Because if your scope of your business is accessible in a lot of different jurisdictions, then it's going to be difficult for a court to uphold a protection against the scope of any type of non-compete agreement. So that's really the largest consideration as well. If you're geographically based, say you're only in Pennsylvania and you're saying, okay, this individual can't go off for 1 year and compete in Pennsylvania, that most likely will be upheld, depending on the business and things along those lines. But if it's beyond that element of scope and time, then it's most likely not going to be upheld.
Okay, and then we have let's take last question here from Alan. Is software patentable in US different than EU or other countries?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, you are going to need to prepare 2 applications, one for the EU and one for the US. They are going to be different applications. The law is going to be applied differently. There are overlaps and similarities, but you would certainly need to seek out counsel in each jurisdiction who's familiar with that jurisdiction's law. So if we're talking US, you want your US counsel. If we're talking EU, you want to be sure to hire someone who's dealt with maybe global patent practice or someone who's specifically in the EU who handles patent practice.
All right, that is all for us, and thank you, Andrew and Tyler. I think I learned myself a lot here. I'm sure our users learn a lot. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Our pleasure, Mahesh. Thanks for having us. And if anyone needs our contact information, Mahesh obviously has it, and I think we'll post it if anyone needs to reach out and ask questions.
Anybody you trying to start your own startup or company need attorney or legal advice, connect with me. I'll pass you with Andrew. I talk to him all the time, so just let me know.
Sounds good. All right, guys.
All right, thank you. All right,
Hey, Mahesh.
how's it going? Did you learn something, May?
Oh, definitely. I think the most interesting part of that presentation was, for me, plant patents. I had no idea that you could patent a living plant.
I did not know that. I have a plant right here. Maybe I should.
Maybe. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yep, yep. All right, so let's talk about our next session. What we're talking about, and invite our guests there.
Yes, so next up, we are going to learn all about how to build an MVP and how to test drive it with Alan O'Neill and David McCarter.
Hello, and good morning.
Good morning.
Good evening, good afternoon.
Hey, how's everybody?
I'm still
Great.
up.
Welcome. Sorry, I don't think I have the best connection. I think I was frozen for a second, but hello and welcome.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out if it was my computer or your guys' computer that keeps freezing.
Yeah, I think, like I was telling Mahesh and Simon earlier, that we've been hit with part of a hurricane in Philadelphia. So I think my connection is a little shaky from all of the rain this week. But welcome. We're so excited to have you guys back.
Your connection's flaky because the water got into the internet lines, right?
Exactly.
And, it's preventing it from working correctly.
I think that's how it works. Yeah.
You know, the internet's just a series of tubes, right? Remember that guy saying that?
Right.
Yep. All right,
And
guys. Thank
what
you,
the
May.
cloud is somebody else's computer, right?
Yep. All right, thank you, May. Guys, welcome to the show. So today, in this part, I guess, session, we are going to talk about building your MVP. If you are a internet or software startup founder, entrepreneur, starting your own, idea turning into reality. In previous session we learned about first thing you want to do is make sure you are protected, at least do trademark and register your company depending on all those company type. But the next part in the startup journey is building your MVP. Like, what does your idea look like, and how do you really first build the MVP, and then how do you test drive it, how do you take it to a few people. So Ellen, I want to start with you, and this session is no presentation. It's going to be more like a panel and Q&A and discussions. So, and I've been part of startups for past several years. I'm sure same thing with you. So you want to start a little bit more. I want you to start with what does MVP really means and why it plays a major role in the startup world.
Sure. So I went away and years ago, a number of times I made the mistake of thinking that I had this great idea and I knew exactly what the customer wanted and I knew better than them, and they were going to pay me like so much money that it would be sick and I would have to have a backhoe at my front door just to push the money away. Okay. I knew stuff and they knew nothing. And you very quickly realize that when you go off and spend a huge amount of time building a product, and you put money and time and effort and everything else, and you bring it to the customer and they say, "What's this? This is no use to me," right? Mm-hmm. You realize that actually the old concept of building a huge big thing, a big monolith, and bring it to a customer and saying, hey, this is awesome, buy it. It doesn't work, okay? Because there's an old saying that says that a business plan will never survive first contact with your market or with your customer. And this is the same with a product. And years ago, we had to go out and we had to buy huge big servers, and we had to have hundreds and thousands of hours of programmer time and everything else to get products built. Now we can go, file a new website inside, and we got a new website up and built. There's many companies that are successful today who have gone and they've started their software product without any software. What they have done is they have put up a mock page on their website, and they've advertised it, and they have seen what people come to the page, what buttons they click on, and depending on this, they build the products that the people click on and that they're looking for. The message here is that it is, in this day and age, it is too expensive and a waste of our time to throw money and energy behind what you think is what the customer wants. You need to start off with the very smallest possible idea, and you need to bring it to the customer and say, what do you think? And this is the minimal part. And then the MVP is the viable. So what's viable? So you'll go to a load of different small ideas to a customer, and those small ideas make up one starting point, and that one starting point is your viable product. So it's incredibly important not to think that you know everything, but to go and talk to your customers, and that's where MVP starts. You say, what's your pain? What do you want? And I don't want to hear like all of the huge wish lists. I just want to know what's the bare minimum that we can get away with, and that's where it starts.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's a great point. And I think I want to add more to that is that when, and I made these mistakes same mistakes many times. It's just not one time. Is that when we sit down with some of my own ideas, some more we had different founders. When we start building this, they just keep adding one idea, other idea, right? So most of the entrepreneurs are like, we are like full of ideas. Okay, we want to bring everything into this one product. But point is not about us, it's all about the customers, right? Even in C# corner, I'll give you an idea. When I launched, we launched this in 99, we start building it in 2000, it was launched. We had the features what LinkedIn has today. We had interviews, we had jobs, we have training, we had everything you can imagine. But point was, as a user, you cannot just give them so much. It's like going to if I'm a customer and you go to this big shop with a million things and you are just confusing the customer, right? So that's first thing. If you are a startup founder, first thing you need to come up with, as Alan said, is come up with that one minimum viable feature that you can give it to users and let them just learn it, use it, and come back to you. And then slowly you can sneak in one more new feature. And you look at the Facebook, right? Facebook started simply by sharing photos and just feed. And now look at them today, 20 years later and 15 years later, it's like now there are millions of features.
Well, Amazon, I mean, I don't know, I don't think the millennials will remember, but Amazon started just selling books.
That's used books, not even new books, used books.
Yeah, that's all they did. They didn't do what they do now, which is kind of crazy, but from what they started, but that's all they did. And they were so successful because they were able to sell books, even when they got to the new books, they were able to sell them cheaper than the bookstore because, when you go to the bookstore, you basically pay the price on the back of the book, right? But Amazon was always selling them cheaper than the bookstore, and that's why there's not many bookstores left anymore,
Correct.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, it's one simple idea.
Yeah, so now once you have your MVP, first feature launch, would you say, Alan and David, that it should be more like an iterative process? So when you start doing it, not just keep building and giving them maybe talk to your customers, right? Maybe first learn, okay, what they like, what they didn't like. Let's spend some time on this. How do you interact with customer? And I know, during our discussions, and I'll talk more about what kind of customers you want to engage with. So let's just talk about the whole iterative process, and how do you take that feedback and go back to your team, and rather than build, should you also have a smaller team? Should it be like a lean approach if you are a software developer, or do you just want to go ahead and hire a bunch of people and start building a bunch of things?
Can I wind back just a
Yeah.
little bit before that? Because a question in my head always, and I bet it's the same, when someone says MVP, say, that's cool, but how do I know what to build first? What's
Yeah.
that first feature, dude? Okay, like before I even get my lean team together and everything else, how do I know what to build, right? I've come up with a very simple way, and I use it now every single time. And what I do is I put down a list of what I think are the features that people want on one side, and then I have two columns, and one of them is how easy or difficult this thing is to build, and I call that the cost of building. And then on the other column, I put down a list of what's the value of this to the customer, right? And when I say value, I mean either what's it going to add to them? Is it going to save them money, or is it going to make them money? Because that's what it's all about with a product. Is it going to make you money or save you money? Okay. Yeah. And what I do is I then go through the first column, which is the cost of producing this thing, the cost of generating this thing. And I put down numbers from 1 to 10, or how many items I have. But the trick is you can never repeat the same number twice. That's the trick, right? So if I've got 10 items, I've got to classify them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you'd always say, oh, but this is like, that's like so much priority the same as this thing. Well, they're not. You've got to make a decision, right? 1 or 2. And then you do exactly the same thing with the other column, which is the benefit or the pain to the customer. Then when you're finished, you've got a list of features. You've got a list of ranking, 10 down to 1 of what it's going to cost you in time or complexity to develop. And then you have another column of 1 to 10 of what it's worth to the customer, either benefit to them or profit back to you, right? Payment back to you. And you simply then make your decision based on what's the one that has the biggest impact or to the customer with the biggest payback to you with the smallest development cost to you. And that's how you decide what your first number of functions are going to be, or functionality in your minimal viable product. Okay, so
And
that's the very
you will
first.
call this as a more like a 10-90 or 80-20 rule, where you
Not
only
even.
spend,
No,
yeah.
it's even different to that. I know we said we wouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it if I'm allowed to. I'm going to do a 30-second share. Have you got my screen there?
Yep.
Okay, right. So this is the thing. When I'm talking about this stuff, I talk about this here, and I just give just 2 slides on it, right? So there's this one here. I'm going to talk about. I'm developing this awesome new alarm clock app, and here's my grid. I put down on the side the proposed features. It's got to have a basic alarm, a ringtone, maybe choose something to wake me up from my Spotify list, snooze, voice wake up reminder, and then I've got the difficulty, the effort required, and the impact on my revenue, what the customer wants. And I just put them down, and I have to give them, numbers 1 to 7, because there's 7 items in this, and I can never repeat the same number twice. And then I do exactly the same thing on my impact on revenue, or on the benefit to the customer. And then what I simply do is I go across and I say, what has the biggest impact on my income or my customer, and what has the lowest effort required or the lowest difficulty for me? And that's how I decide, and that's how I do it.
Well,
Does that
that's
make
great.
sense?
That's great. David, do you want to spend a little bit, what's your thought on this? I know you work with different software companies, you manage teams, and then, when you're managing this, building in new features in the software, do you agree with that? Well, what's your take on that?
Well, I'd like to talk more about I mean, with this subject, I'd like to talk about, talking to the customers, which I think is, the number one most important thing to do, right? And the other thing, I didn't hear a lot at the beginning of the conference, but Mahesh, you said that, make sure you have an original idea. I want to make sure that everybody hears that, because, just my big thing with starting a company, and I've even, mentored people about this is, don't do something somebody's already done, right? You got to do something unique and to get your foot in the door. But I'd like to talk about talking to the customers, right? Because I've been part of lots of startups. I've wanted to start a lot of startups, and most of those startups don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And actually, all the startups I worked at when I was a beginner don't exist anymore. But for me, I was most successful when I was able to talk to the customers, right? To provide something they really want. And I've got lots of stories about that, but I'll tell you a quick one. I was hired by a very small startup company here in San Diego. There was me and two other developers. I was the lead, the two other developers, and there was the owner. That was it. Oh, and I think his wife. So that was basically it. And so he basically made a contract with Edwards Theaters. And do you have Edwards Theaters, Mahesh, back there?
We do and we don't.
Yeah. So at least on the West Coast, Edwards movie theaters is really, really big. It's one of the biggest, movie theaters, on the West Coast, I guess. And they needed a new ticketing system. And so somehow this guy convinced Edwards Theaters that, he was the right company, the right guy to write this ticketing system. So when he hired me, he basically told me all the requirements and I would say, have you talked to the customers? What do the customers want? And he goes, I know what the customers want. Just listen to me, and he kept saying that over and over and over again,
Yep.
and what could I do really? Yeah. I said, okay. And so when I had a prototype ready that worked, not fully worked, but at least got through the whole workflow of, creating tickets and doing reports and things like that, I finally convinced my boss to let me go down to one of the local Edwards theaters. And he was pretty reluctant, but I pushed hard enough and he finally let me go. And so I spent an entire afternoon down in the ticketing booth at Edwards Theaters. I didn't talk to the manager. I talked to the people that, took the money and gave the tickets, right? And what I did was I set up my system right next to the girl doing the tickets, and everything she did, I mimicked on my system, right? Just to make sure that, we were, meeting their needs and things like that. And then during, and when they have movies, there's always this up and down with the ticket sales, they sell a bunch of tickets and then they don't do anything for 20 minutes and then they start selling tickets again. So in these lulls, in these 20-minute lulls, I would talk to the ticket person and just talk to them about, the frustrations they have with the current system, what would they like to see, in a ticketing system. And what I found out by this is my boss was completely wrong.
Yeah.
Everything he told me was wrong,
Yep.
and I basically I didn't have to rewrite the whole system, but I basically had to do a lot of work for the user, the application that they were going to use. Right.
Yep.
And so I had to go back and change everything because my boss obviously didn't talk to the ticket people, right? Because the ticket people are the ones using the software, not the managers, not, corporate people. It's the ticketing people, right? And so, and I have more stories like this, but, my personality is that, when I go into, especially a startup like company, I want to be part of the entire system the entire flow from talking to the customers to delivering the software, right? Because I believe, especially as an architect level, that if I'm part of the whole system, the whole thing, then I have a better view on how to deliver, software that meets the customer's needs. And that's one of the biggest problems. Like even right after this conference, I have to bolt and go to the dentist, right? And whenever I go to, my doctors and things like that, they're using computer systems, to do the patient information. And I always ask them, so how do you like your system? And almost every single one says, we hate it.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, well then, whatever company your doctor bought this from obviously didn't talk to you.
So it's interesting, Dave, that you were talking there about going out and talk to the customer, and brings us right back to the question that Mahesh had when he kind of started us off, which is the need for small teams and iterative working. And one of the things that it's critically important to do when you're building your MVP is to ensure that you have a representative of the different stakeholders in your team. This doesn't mean they work with you side by side, but it means they're involved in every decision. So when you have your, be it your 1 or your 10 developers in a team, you always must have a representative of the customer. And that doesn't mean the manager, it means who's going to be using the software on your team. And I think when you do that, it brings the thing to the next level. And that then leads into another point, Mahesh, which you had been talking about earlier, which is the mindset of doing this. Do you want to maybe talk about the mindset of this and the importance of it?
Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit more because I want to talk more about the customers, right? But before we go to customers, so the way, when I build these systems, apps or websites, whatever, obviously in the beginning, when you're building this MVP, you don't really have a customer, right? You just have some users they are going to use. And first thing that Dave said, you need to understand what their problems are, right? What is the main problem we are solving, and how you're solving by making it very simple and easy, right? You cannot just solve a problem by, you cannot say, oh, I want to just climb on a roof and build like a plane to just climb, it has to be a ladder. So obviously you have to come up with a simplest solution possible, fastest solution possible, cheapest solution possible for the problem. That's number one we learned from the discussion. Number two, obviously you're not going to talk to customers right away. So the way we work with the startups is when we will select a group of beta users, beta testers and users, and these are the people who some of us we know, which we know that these could be the guys who are potential users of the final product, right? So we could call them early adopters or beta testers, right? So early adopters are the people, they give us a real critical feedback and they have time for us. So as a startup founder, you need to find that few people, and when I'm working with a startup, I put 4 to 10 people. These are early adapters. Not only they test the system, but they're also part of our discussions while we are building these features. And we will do weekly meetings that, this is the first 3 features we are going to launch. So we are going to, let's say if I'm building an app, right? Let's say social media app. We'll say, this is our login screen look like, this is our feed look like, and this is how we are going to upload these photos and share and like. And then we create and present these screens to the users. And sometimes we also watch them how they're using it. It's again, same those 10 guys. So see what they are clicking, what they're poking around, and get their feedback. So so we good here. Now let's back to your. Now we can start with your Alan, your point here. Second point.
Just even before you do,
there you go.
I just want to say, yeah. Just before you, I just want to say, again, these things are so interesting because when you say, we start with maybe nothing or some users, and then we start with maybe hopefully a customer who decides maybe they want pay some money or something. Another important thing is to make sure that you don't end up building minimum features or a minimum product that is only useful to that one company or that one user. Make sure that you always question, is this just useful for that person or is it good for my entire proposed user base? And that's a
Mhm.
critical question to ask. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and so going on then to the next item that Mahesh had put into the agenda was mindset for the team and growth mindset. It's often said that one bad apple will kill the rest of the basket. Okay, you've got one bad apple, one person who is not right for the team, and they can kill the team. They won't only kill the team; they'll kill the entire project. They can kill the startup. So it's incredibly important that when you are pulling together a team, if there's anybody at all that you don't get on with, don't have them on the team. If
Yeah.
there are people who are constantly negative, don't have them on the team. You only want positivity on your team. You only want people who can see the big picture. You don't have to have everybody who has the genius architect mind that sees the vision that you see, but you want people that will buy into your vision, that they will see the growth that you have, and they will say, I want part of that. I want to learn as a person. I want to learn as a technologist. I want to learn as a business person, and I want to have fun. And,
Yeah.
and that's a huge part of the growth mindset, that if you cannot have a team that can work well together, if your team would not be happy to go out to eat an evening meal together, or would not be happy to invite each other to each other's homes, they're not a team that should be working together. It's really important. Everybody has to, commit 100%, and they have to know also, part of the growth mindset is actually not about growing. It's about knowing when to walk away. It's about
Yeah.
knowing when to say, actually, I'm not able for this. I'm not capable of doing this. I'm good enough to get it to this point, but beyond this, I need somebody else, or I need to call for help. And that's part of the growth mindset.
Yeah, and just to add that, right? So startup is like a growing a baby. I always call that, right? That's my very big reference, because I grew my son from baby to he's now 18. So when you see your kid is growing, you need to make sure your parents, your coaches, everybody's kind of involved for the growth. So startup is same way, as you said, Alan. Your team needs to be not only highly vested in 100% vested in it, but they need to be highly motivated, energetic, and they need to believe in the idea. That's biggest thing. And frankly speaking, I advise everybody I tell, and some people are probably watching this, I say, if this guy does not have startup mindset, don't put that in the team. Startup mindset is not like, oh, it's my 8 to 5 and I'm done, I'm going home. Startup is a 24-hour job, 7 days a week for everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
Anybody you're watching, go ahead, David.
No, you remind me of, basically why I live where I am right now is I moved here because I was working for a startup about 3 blocks away from me, and I hate commuting, and so I said, I want to live right next to where I'm working, right? And so I could walk to work, which I did,
Yep.
But you're right, that I remember that company, and that company is one of the best teams I ever worked at. And unfortunately, I can't say that very much, but one of the reasons I think is where I am is because of that team. We worked so well together. We were a really good, well-oiled machine. Everybody from the developers to the QA people, everybody that's involved in writing the software. We were friends. We were friends after the company ended. We had every Friday afternoon, we would go out to happy hour together. We did so many things together. We even played music together because, there was another guy in there who I still know that plays drums, and so we worked really well together. And that's really, really important for a startup and I totally agree with Alan, is one bad apple can really ruin it. And luckily, the startups that I've worked at, even this company I was just talking about, is we did hire bad apples, and luckily, they were gone pretty quick, one way or the
Yep.
other, you know.
Yep.
So we could keep, going with, our vision of the product. We let the bad apples go, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then one next. So anybody who are watching again, guys, looks like few people joined again. You guys, welcome to the startup conference. We are right now in this session talking about building your MVP and how to launch it to very limited customer base. If you have any, again, this conference is for you. We want to make sure you learn something today. Any questions you have about anything related
Yeah.
to startups, just feel free to pose those questions, and we are here to answer those. So, Alan and David, my next question, which I go, I work with the startups, and I was like that. Keep in mind, my background is programming. So some of us, we are entrepreneurs, we are founders and all that. We are also very stubborn in our way. We think that we know the best and we are the best and all that. So as a, startup mindset, and I learned the hard way, and that it's not really about us, it's all about our startup, right? So look at Steve Jobs, look at Bill Gates. Steve Jobs left the company, came back, and so on and so forth. So when you are building this startup, it has to be more about the startup if you really want to make it successful, and not about you, me, or other people. What do you think on that? You want to shed some light on this topic?
Yeah. At the end of the day, as you said, this thing is like a baby. And it's like bringing up a child. And when you start off, you have got to pay attention to every single little detail. And you've got to be very detail orientated, and you micromanage the way, and you nurse it along, and you feed it when you need to feed it, and you change its nappy, and you spend time teaching it how to talk and to walk, and you're watching and everything else. But you need then to let the child grow. You need to let the business start to grow on its own. You need to step back. And then it'll happen is at some stage you'll find out that you start losing control. Okay, and that's natural. That's normal. And like a teenager, it'll start fighting against you. You'll say, "Oh my God! If I was doing the code myself, I would do it this way. I would do it that way. I would have it done so much faster." But this is the thing. Like a child, you've got to let it grow, and you've got to let it find its own feet. It's got to morph, and it's got to transform into that adult, and it grows up. So to use that very same analogy, it takes on a life of its own, and you've got to let it grow. But your job as a founder is to always make sure that you keep listening to your customers. You keep listening to the market. You look at your competition. You look at the trends in the market. You look at what's changing, and you constantly ask yourself, are we still on the right track? Are we still on the right track? And one of the things that Amazon and Bezos constantly says is, I don't care how good we are. I don't care how big we are. How can we make things better for the customer? Because that's what it's all about. It's not about how fancy your gear is. It's not about how clever it is or how smart it is. It's about, does it help the customer? And then to go back to Dave's thing earlier on of every time he encounters somebody with using some software, he says, "Hey, how do you like your software?" You don't want to be the guy who goes in there and says, "How do you like the software?" And they say, "Hey, your software sucks, man." I wrote that software. Okay? You don't want that. You've got to always strive to make sure that at the end of the day, the customer is king, and you focus on making them happy. At the end of the day, all being equal, if you've got two products that are exactly the same, the one that the customer will use is the one that they're happy with. So keep your customer happy in everything. And it's not just about your product. Your product is also your company. It's also your team. It's your QA. It's your support. It's your website. It's how people perceive you. It's your Twitter account. It's your Facebook account. So your company is not just your technology. Your company is everything. It's everything.
Yeah, that's one thing. That's one thing I talk about a lot is perception. Perception is very, very, very important. And And the other thing that I kind of thought of when Alan was talking there was one thing I also kind of warn people about is, you get one shot, you know, and if you screw it up the first time, people won't come back. They'll go find another software that's like that, because everybody copies ideas, and there's always somebody out there in competition. And if you screw up the first time, the customer sees your app, that's it. You've lost them forever, pretty much. And that's exactly the way it works for me. I use an app, and it certainly doesn't meet my needs, and I can tell that they didn't really talk to the customers. I'm out. I go find something else. It's a big software world out there.
Yeah, in today's world, as there's so many options, right? It's not back to 1990s where there was only one software. Okay, there was only one. These days there's so many options. It's like a whole buffet of everything. So if you are first time is very important, and that's where challenge comes for founders. Like, okay, should we go there? Should we not go there? Because what if users don't like it? What they like it? That's always, we've been through that with several startups, and they're like, no, what if they don't like it? What they don't come back? So that's when you really engage some of those people very early and get the real feedback, not the one they are always supporting you. You want the critics, like you want the people who say, you know what, this is great, but I don't really care about it, as you said earlier. And my focus is solve me this problem, right?
Yeah. And one thing I want to just put out there really quick before we end is, I when I was a beginner, I specifically targeted startups, right? And I mainly did it because, back then, there's a lot of startups, a lot of cash, flowing around, and there were a lot of startups back then, and I believed in being part of the start of a company, so they'll sell it and they'll make lots of money. Well, that never happened, unfortunately. But it's really important to, I think, I keep coming back to the customer, and you have to meet their needs. You have to understand their issue, and you have to solve their issue, right? And the other thing I was going to say is, the other reason I targeted startups is because that's where I learned a lot, right?
Yes.
Because when you are in a startup, and I even suggest to my beginner students, go find a startup, because at a startup you wear many different hats, right? And you have to, because there's only a few of you, right? And that's why I can do DevOps, and I can do software engineering, and I can write database systems, right? It's because I was part of startups, right? And that's a really great way to get a lot of experience. Just make sure there's at least one really good person there that can be your mentor, right? If you hire a bunch of beginners for a startup, I'm not sure that's going to work very well, right?
Yeah, agree. So now let's move to our last topic. We have 5 more minutes, and that's where we talk about pivot, right? For any startup, it's very important to change things around, and very quickly, and also cost efficiently. Like, right? We cannot just go and things don't work out first time, and you can just go and redo the whole thing and take 6 more months, because everything changes in 6 months these days. So, Alan, you want to lead to that way? And again, I'll give you an idea. Right now, we are actually in one of our startups. It's been 3 years old. We have spent millions of dollars already on that. It's going nowhere. So we are right now in a big pivot mode. We are actually even moving out from the segment and going to a different customer base.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's a nice segue to end up on, when we've just talked about listening to the customer, and you've talked, Mahesh, about listening to the hard customer, the difficult customer, right? We don't learn an awful lot from customers who say, yes, you're awesome. We learn most from customers who say, you're getting it wrong, okay? And if you discover that you're getting it wrong, actually, here's the what we call the acid test, right? How do you know if the product that you're producing as your MVP, how do you know if it is good or not good? How do you know this? And the simple test is this. You go to your customer and you say, if I took this product away from you in the morning, you can't have it anymore, will this cause you pain? And they say, it's okay. You don't have a business and you don't have a product. Okay. That's when you need to ask the customer, why? What do I need to do to take away your pain, so that if I say in the morning, I'm taking away my product, you say, please don't take it away. I love it so much. I will pay you money, 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 money. That's what you want. And that's the acid test. That's the key, right? If you do not get that feedback from your customer, you need to adapt. You need to pivot. You need to see, where is the money? You need to chase the money. The thing about startups is you always go to solve a problem of one degree or the other. On one hand, you have what we call a nice to have. Okay, this is an aspirin. You've got a headache, or sorry, this is a vitamin tablet. Okay, so you think, well, I know if I take a vitamin C tablet every day, I'm less likely to have a head cold in the winter. And then on the other hand, you have a painkiller, you have an aspirin. You say, I've got a damn headache. It's incredibly sore. I need to take this painkiller. When you're doing a business, steer away from vitamins and always go towards painkillers, because painkillers are where the money is, and painkillers are where the customers are more willing to give you money and to allow you to solve their problem. Mm-hmm. So whenever you find that the customers are saying, not sure, right? That's when you say to yourself, I have a vitamin pill and I need to pull out my aspirin. I need to pull out my paracetamol. I need to give these guys some Bismol, whatever it is. But you want those guys to be so much in pain that you're like this raging professor, medical doctor coming over the hills, saying, I will take away your pain. I will take away your pain. And you pivot to wherever the pain is. Pivot to the pain. Pivot to the pain. Say it with me, guys. Pivot to the pain. Pivot to the pain.
Definitely. Pivot to the pain. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it, guys. So, yeah, I think anybody who's watching, I think about customers, as David said and Alan said. Think about the pain. Think about how important it is for them, for your product to use, and how it's going to impact their lives, right? If you build something like that, chances are your MVP is going to turn into probably a fully functional, successful product one day.
Yeah, and I'd like to close on, I became a patent inventor because of kind of this, what we've all been talking about, right? And the biggest reason I became that inventor was because I listened to the customers. I spent a day with the customers. I saw their pain, like Alan was talking about, right? I saw their pain with their current, whatever they're doing, and I fixed it, right? And I became a patent inventor, and I think that's pretty cool. But, being an inventor, I don't really care about. What I cared about was I solved the customer's problem. I took away their pain, basically like Alan was saying. And they were so happy with that system, right? And that's how you succeed, is doing that.
Very well, guys. Well said. Thank you so much for this coming on. Alan, I will see you in next session as well. But David, thank you so much. And if you are available for the panel, at the last panel, please feel free to stop by.
Sure, if I'm back from the dentist.
Hopefully, and good luck with your dentist. Hopefully, everything's good.
And make sure you ask them about their software, Dave.
I will. But I'd also like to plug my show tomorrow. So tomorrow on Rockin' the Code World with Donette Dave, I have the man for Cosmos DB, Mark Brown, is going to be my guest. I'm going to interview him. So if you have any burning questions about Cosmos DB, or you need to understand Cosmos DB, this is the man. So tune in tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, thank you, Alan and Mahesh. That was awesome. I'm joined here by my pup, Leon. He was on last conference, and he wanted to say hello again. He loves
Hey,
startups.
Leon. How are you, Leon? What's up? Good. I hope he's learning something.
Oh yeah, he wants to know if dogs can learn how to code. He's got a
Definitely,
few
definitely,
ideas.
definitely, definitely. Great idea. All right, let's invite our next guest. Start the next show.
Yes, so our next topic will be exploring types of investments and how to get funding. And we welcome we'll welcome our new speaker to the stage, Jarom Heaps.
Hello, how's it going, everyone?
Hello, welcome.
Hey,
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
hey,
you bet.
Jerome, how are you? Simon, we don't have a video.
All right, so where are you joining
All
us from
right.
today, Jerome?
So I'm joining from South Carolina, from
Okay,
Charleston. Yep.
wonderful. I am very jealous of your weather right now.
Ah,
I
yeah.
keep talking about it, but we've been having some horrible weather up here, so I'm sure you guys have a lot more sun and warm weather down there in South Carolina than we do in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's pretty nice up here. I mean, I grew up in Utah, and by Halloween, I remember going trick-or-treating wearing a coat. So it's nice to be in South Carolina. It's a little bit warmer, and yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. So, Jerome, welcome to the show. This session we are going to talk about, biggest problem, biggest challenge, biggest, biggest worry for any startup is how to get that money. So,
Yep, you bet.
and Alan, welcome back. I think your video is a little bit flaky. You are turning into Santa Claus. Uh,
Used to be DJ Allen, now you're Santa
yeah.
Claus Allen.
Yeah, well, I've just kind of it's just hitting. It's starting to hit the hour of darkness outside, so it's like a dramatic change in the backlight, and
All right.
now that should be slightly different now.
Okay.
Any better?
Yeah, better.
Yeah,
Yep.
cool.
Jerome, you have any presentation?
Nope, no presentation.
All right, awesome. That's great. So that's perfect. So what we'll do is lead into the investment. So anybody who's joining us and just joined recently, welcome to the show. Today, this session, we're going to talk about. We have Jarom Heaps here. He's going to introduce himself. If we don't have a video, but we'll talk about investment, right? How to raise funds for a startup. What are the different types of investments, and investor types. How does the company valuation work, and the fees, and so on and so forth. Um, so, Jerome, why don't you start with your introduction? Tell people about what you do, and from a startup world, what your role in companies and so on. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been working with startups, small businesses for over 5 years now. I personally, when I was in college, I started a business, and I love working with small early stage companies. So that kind of transitioned into a role in helping companies find money because, there are a lot of good ideas out there. There are patents. There are great ideas. People are really smart. They find unique solutions to a lot of problems. But getting that off the ground is a whole different task, right? Creating a business around an idea is a whole different task, and so fundraising is key to every business, whether it's putting in your own money on day one to be able to kind of test the concept and prove something out, to later on when you need to bring in larger dollars and give up a larger piece to your business to really grow the business and pour gas on the fire. So
Yeah. Yep. So that's a good point to start with. Is so as a entrepreneur or founder of a company, just brand new company. Imagine just brand new company started, and we hear these terms like, okay, angel investment, VCs versus which is good, which is bad, before that we also, it's like some self-funded. So maybe you want to spend some time on talking about, there's a self-funded, then you can go get money from friends and family, then angel, and then VCs, and what are the major differences, and what is your recommendation even going forward for the first time startup founders?
Yeah, yeah, you bet. So, so what you'll find is the best money you can put in is the cheapest money, right? So as you move through the funding cycles, money becomes a little bit more expensive, right? I would say, especially when you're starting out in kind of proof of concept seed stage, using your own capital is probably the best. Maybe starting to use some friends and family money is all right, but you really need to prove out the idea or the business model prior to seeking larger dollars. So if you can, I mean, this is why a lot of people will save money and maybe work one job while starting out and incubating a startup, because they need the capital to be able to start the business. So kind of first off, the best capital day one, the least expensive, is going to be money you can put in from yourself. And if you're kind of tapped out there, the next is to go and start raising from friends and family, because at this point, typically you haven't really proven the concept. And so when you're asking friends and family to invest in your business, what they're essentially doing is they're investing in you, right? They're investing in you as a person because they believe in you. They believe that you're smart, you're capable, and then maybe they can see some sort of potential in the idea. Typically, those are going to be smaller dollars, depending on who you're connected to. I mean, you may have a family member that can fund you the whole time, but typically friends and family checks are going to be smaller checks, and it's kind of just as a level of comfort because they may or may not be accredited. And then after that, once you move to kind of institutions or family offices or angel investors, those type of investors are, I mean, their principal concern in either lending you money or investing in the company is how are they going to get a return on the money that they're putting into your business. So once you're using, maybe the next step is an angel investor, it's going to be kind of a mid-sized dollar amount, but they want to see, if I invest now, what is this business going to become? What is the potential? Do you have any traction? Do you have any users? Do you have any revenue? They want to see that there's a little more of a substantiated business before they're going to put some dollars behind it. And that funding can come in a variety of ways. It can come in through a pure equity investment. It can come in as a convertible note. But that's kind of the next step above self-funding and friends and family. And then once you're going out to kind of the larger institutions, the family offices, which for those that don't know, a family office is essentially a wealthy family or group of families that have decided to invest in maybe one niche or one section of investment. It's kind of like a VC, where a VC is a fund typically where they've raised money around a certain niche. So it could be technology, it could be healthcare. So a VC would also be targeting a specific niche there. But once you're moving to a VC, they definitely want to see a path to an exit, right? It doesn't have to be an immediate exit, but they want to see how, either one, they're going to get paid back, but two, they also want to know how they're going to be able to make a profit on the investment.
Great.
It's interesting
Yeah.
what you said there, Jeroen, about the different levels, and starting off with your own dollar if you have it. We talk about friends and family, and certainly over in the EU, we call that the 3F. The last one we haven't talked about, which is the friends, families, and fools. And what I find interesting is that you talk about you go off on your own dollar and you build something up, and then you need a bit more, so you ask your friends and family to give you some more money. You're right in that it's going to be a smaller amount than the higher level, and they're going to give you that money because they know you, they trust you, they love you, all these different things. But generally, they're not professional investors. You move on then to, as you said, the more professional angels, family funds, up to VCs. And you mentioned the word traction. Now, we know that at the very early stage for yourself, like, you just have this idea, so the traction is your own brain and your own desire. And then your family, well, they know you, and maybe they don't want to not give you some money, right? So you get that. But once you go beyond your local sphere, right? Once you go beyond your own comfort zone of friends, families, and fools, and you get to people you don't know, what are the different levels of traction that they want to see? What does traction mean at those levels? Could you maybe talk us through those?
Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, one of them is users, right? How many people are using your technology, using your device? Users is one level of traction. A second level would be revenue. Again, that kind of falls within users, right? But who are you selling to? Like, do you have anybody who's actually paying for your good or service or product or technology? So revenue is another marker there. And then kind of another measure would be earnings, right? So not only are you able to sell your product, but are you able to make money selling your product? So those would be kind of the most, I would say, that probably the biggest levels of traction would be that. So.
So a little background, Alan. Jarom has helped raise funds for some of my friends, and also that's a little background on that. And then so you just mentioned one more thing here, equity versus convertible notes, right? So if I'm a startup founder, I don't know much difference. What should I choose? What's the good versus bad among those two? You want to spend some time on that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways you can take money from people. Equity. So, and it kind of depends on risk level. That's a good way to look at the way you're taking investment. So if you're taking equity, like a pure equity investment, so someone says, I'll give you $1 million to invest in your business. I'm going to want maybe 50% of your business for $1 million. You're giving up half of your business for those funds. They now hold 50% of the risk. So, for example, say your idea doesn't turn into anything. They're just out the money, right? It's pure equity. They're completely out. But they also hold 50% of the risk of the success, right? The positive side of things. So you've given up 50% of the success of the business. If you do something else like a convertible note, what initially they hold debt. So they hold a claim on all assets of the business, all IP. So say the business were to fail, they would still walk away with whatever tangible or intangible assets were there. And the convertible note gives them the option to convert into equity at a future date at a future price. So a convertible note is most typical. There are other things similar to a convertible note called a safe. Basically, that gives the investor an option. So that protects them from some of the downside risk, but still gives them the upside risk once they have the ability to convert. So that's a convertible note. There's also just pure debt. So pure debt doesn't have that option, but that's just borrowing money. So you could borrow money from somebody and then you just have the obligation to pay it back with some fixed interest rate over time. So those are kind of there are quite a few options. But when you look at it, it is all about what you're willing to give up for the investment. And the more sophisticated of an investor you're working with, they may be asking for a little more security, a little more upside. So anyway, that kind of goes back to the friends, family, and fools, right? That type of money is going to be the least expensive for you because you may be able to negotiate kind of a better deal early on.
Okay.
It's interesting what you said there, Jarom, about you know, I think that a lot of founders, when they're starting off, they don't realize that there's these layers of complexity as you move up the food chain in investment. And the only thing they generally have in their head is, what percentage do I give away?
Yes.
Right. That's all they have in their head is what percent. And I think there's two things that you have said that are important to point out and to maybe talk about, because it's, I think, where a lot of founders trip up, is to know the difference between dilution and preemption, so that you can say, okay, well, I've given away, you know, X% of my company and I still own 80%, so it's awesome, it's really cool. But if you've signed a deal that says you may own 80%, but that's only after somebody else gets all of their money back plus another 10x on top of that, then your 80% is actually worth about 2%.
Yeah.
So could you maybe just give a little bit of clarity around what that means for the founder?
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways deals can get complicated, right? So, I mean, as a founder, I mean, you may be wondering how you can quit your day job and do your startup full time, right? That may be something that's going through your mind. I mean, if there's a payback, that may make that a little bit harder for you to do, right? If you have some sort of fixed obligation that you have to pay them back, whatever, 2 times their money before, it can just make things a little more expensive, right? It can make it harder to it kind of gives you a little more headwind. It might be a good way to look at it, that not only do they get a piece of the company, but I mean, they get to be paid back as well. So it just makes it more expensive. So you just have to consider the cost of capital. And I'm a firm believer that there's an investor for every single type of deal. A lot of it is just finding that person or finding that group. But I mean, that being said, you just need to be a little, I mean, it's worth taking the time to be choosy on what dollars you take and how you take them. Because just because you may really need the money, that may not be the best partner for your business, and you could be hurting yourself long term. If you would have been patient and waited another month or 2, you may have been able to pick a deal that was half as expensive, right? So it's being smart about the money you take, because, I mean, this is a partner, right? Whether you like it or not, if you take money from 10 family members, you better believe at Christmas, those 10 family members are going to ask you how the investment's coming, right? If you take money from a family office, you better believe they're going to be following up with you every other week, asking how their investment's coming. So there's external costs. It's not just how much money, what percentage of your business you're giving up. I mean, this is somebody you're committing to for a long time. It's almost like a marriage, right? I mean, you're going to be with this person for a long time. Or group.
That's the key, isn't it? You know, this is like a marriage, and one of the things I think that a lot of people don't understand when they start off this this journey is that first of all, things are never going to go as planned, right? Every plan fails. You've got to pivot and twist every other week, right? Yeah. And secondly, in the same ways we talked earlier on there, Mahesh and I and David, about the importance of having the right team to start off with. The team isn't just about the people who are there writing your code or selling your product. The team is the people on your board. The team is the people who are on your network. The team is the people who are getting you that money and pulling it in together. And at the end of the day, it is about a marriage. And it's insanely hard. It's awful easy to fall in love, but it's insanely hard to get divorced, right?
Yeah.
Divorce costs a hell of a lot more than a marriage. So, you know, you need to think long and hard about this. And I know that there is the conversation about smart money versus dumb money, right? But leaving that bit aside for a second, maybe you could talk to us a bit about, you said there, maybe at the end of the year, you got to talk to your friends and family about, oh, it's going well, and you can bluff a bit and everything else, versus you have a family fund or you got a VC, no matter what size it happens to be, who's going to be coming back to you and saying, you showed me a business plan, you had these metrics, you had this roadmap, I want to see those check boxes, and are you meeting them? And if you're not, is your ass on the line, right? So if you have committed to do these things, is that partner that you've joined up with for this money, are they going to be turning around to you and putting pressure on you personally to say, do what you say that you delivered to get our money, and if you don't, we actually have the right, according to the shareholders agreement or the letter of terms that we put in place, to kick you out, and you suddenly lose your own company. So maybe you could talk around, that journey of losing control when stuff starts going wrong, and how to maybe guard against that early in the journey, and how to set the expectations correctly, both for yourself and for your investment partners.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. Great area, great topic. So it's important when you're initially going out to fundraise that you're setting expectations. I mean, you can lose your company, right? It comes down to probably deal specifics. If you maintain control, but there may be some measures within those documents where they can take you out as CEO. You may still be an owner in the company, but they may be able to replace you as CEO. They may be able to put a board of directors in place that dictates what you do, and essentially you may be an owner, but you may have to follow kind of the rules of the business now versus your own personal rules. So some of that is structure. Some of it also is setting clear expectations, right? So in the beginning, you want to paint a picture how your business can go from small to really big, right? It's exciting to say, I have this solution, it fits its niche, and it's going to become the best in the world. I'm going to do millions or billions, right? But as you set those become the yardstick with which you're measured, right? So when you're setting up some sort of financial projection in the beginning, you definitely want to be optimistic, but you definitely need to be realistic. Optimism is great, but realistic is going to be better for you in the long term, right? So optimistic to bring somebody in, but realistic for finding a real partner.
It's also careful to note there, because you guys are sitting at the moment stateside. I'm over in Europe. Some of our listeners, we got listeners all over the world, and certainly afterwards they'll all be, looking at this from around the globe. People's perceptions of what it is to be successful and investment returns, I think, very much vary on culture and where you come from. So stateside, people will think, oh, we're going to go and get some seed funding, and seed funding is like, 5 or 25 million, right? Whereas someplace else they might say seed funding, oh my God, I got $5,000, woo, we're on the road. So when you're talking about expectations of sales, I presume that you're putting that in the context of the market that you're in, the background of the investors, the product that you're developing, all of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Typically in the U.S., if you're going out to a VC for an A stage or later, you're looking for $1, $2, $3 million, right, or more, right? So in the United States, friends and family, if you're going for a couple $100,000, that's probably best found within your own personal network. Angel investors is maybe a couple $100,000 up to maybe $1 million. That would be a good range for an angel. But if you're looking for more than that, you're probably looking from a family office or VC. But again, that's dependent upon stage as well. If you're in seed stage, you may be able to find a VC that would, all they do is seed investments. So they would put $25,000 to an idea. Again, I mean, I said this a little bit earlier, but I believe there are investors for every deal. I mean, I've seen crazy deals get funded, deals that I never thought should have got funded get funded, and I've seen companies that are really great companies not be able to close on funding. So it's it just taking longer than you thought. An idea you thought was a slam dunk is maybe not a slam dunk, but it's about finding the match, right? I mean, there are thousands of investors, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of investors. It's all about helping them understand what your idea is and kind of bridging the gap between what it is today and what it can be. It's casting a wide enough net. I mean, that's why you hear stories of founders pitching their idea 300 times before finding somebody who would invest it. It was because they were going through this process of finding a match. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, and then there's one more question to lead to that, Alan. Just exactly, so we are not off the topic. So you hear sometimes that, oh, you only want to raise minimum amount of money you need. Can you spend a little time on that? Like, when you say minimum amount, is it looking for a year out, 2 years out, or a smaller window? Or rather than saying, oh, I want the 10 million versus, oh, I only need 1 million.
Yeah, I think sometimes founders get caught up in ideal situations. They're like, well, ideally, I would have $10 million in the bank and I would be able to build this tomorrow, right? But I mean, there's a little bit more realism, right? Depending on the stage of the business, money is more expensive, right? You're definitely better off taking fewer dollars today, as few dollars as you can take, right? Because in the life of a startup, especially early on, that's where the most risk is. So you're going to pay the price for the risk early on. So if you can afford to take smaller dollars early on, I would take smaller dollars early on, right? So if you can say, I can get by with whatever it is, $50,000, I can get by with $500,000 for the next 6 months. That's what I would target in your fundraising is kind of that minimum amount you feel like you can get by with maybe a little buffer, instead of chasing those large checks, because I mean they're going to be expensive, right? Depending on the stage of the business. So
they're expensive, they're more complex, but the other thing not to forget, and everybody in this conversation has seen it, is you're going to run out of money sooner than you think. Always going to happen, so be very careful about that. There's two areas on the fundraising side. We've talked about the FFF, we talked about the angels, we talked about the VCs, and there's two areas that we haven't touched on as sources of money. One of them is a reasonably recent phenomena, which is the whole idea of crowd source funding. And we've seen that certainly, I'm not sure about the States, but certainly in Europe, it's a very, very strong option. And there's a couple of crowd companies that do this, and it's denting a lot of the angel groups and stuff quite heavily to a degree. And it's where it's like an amalgamation of friends, family, and the rest, whereby I'll come along and I'll say, I don't have 50,000 to give you, but I have maybe 2,500 that I've saved up over the past year, and I'll put it into a fund. And that fund then is just like it's like a sort of a separate trust fund, and then it's all amalgamated, and you get 250 from 25 people type of thing, right? That's one thing. And the other one to not let people forget about is your customers, right? You go off to your minimum viable product and you talk to customers. In my current startup, I was out just doing standard consulting, and it's in a very specialist area. I had a particular customer, and they said, look, you're telling us how to do this. We can't do this. We haven't got the experience. We haven't got the skills. Can you just not go and do it and sell it to us, right? So I went ahead and I did that, and then they turned around and they said, hey, this is like so awesome. Can we invest in this, please? Right? So sometimes you'll actually get your customer who will love what you're doing so much that they'll say, we actually need to invest in you to ensure the success of what you're doing, because it is so important to the success of our business. and that's an incredibly strong signal. So I don't know if you've got experience of that or experience of the sort of the crowdfunding side. Could you talk about those if you do?
Yeah, you bet. And I know we may be short on time here at the end of the session, but I mean, crowdfunding is a great option. I would just be careful when you're looking for a platform to help you with crowdfunding. They can kind of be expensive. So just make sure you do your due diligence on platforms. It may not make sense to pay $40,000 or $50,000 to try and raise money through crowdfunding. So just be wise about that. But yeah, there are a lot of individuals that would love to put their money towards interesting ideas. Typically, when I'm talking about crowdfunding, I'm talking about an idea that may be exciting or have some sort of mass appeal versus more of like an industrial or business-to-business type solution. Typically, those aren't exciting enough to be able to get crowdfunding. So, I mean, I would just think about that as, does this have mass appeal? Do I happen to have a lot of customers that would be, I mean, say you have a platform and you have 100,000 users, would my users be interested in investing in my business, right? There's a perfect crowd that you can market to that may be interested in investing in your business. So that's interesting. I mean, nobody said you can't do a joint venture with your biggest customer and have them invest money into your business. I mean, it's okay to be creative. I want kind of I don't want you to be afraid of raising money in any of the ways. I mean, it's an exciting thing to do. It's exciting to go out there and look for a match and be able to get the capital you need to grow your business. And it can come in a lot of different forms. I mean, it's okay to be creative, right? So whether that is you taking money from a customer, a user, I mean, it's all about, how do I grow this business and how do I get the money I need to grow it? So.
All right. I mean, that was great. I think we're running out of time. We don't have any more time left, guys. Those were great questions, great discussions. I think we learned a lot. And good thing is we have this whole recording. So we're going to share more to our millions of users. Say hi to our new guest and I'll see you in a little bit. Thank you.
Hi.
See, just once in a while, she just comes and run around, break everything. Thank you, Jarom, for coming. That was awesome. And we'll keep in touch.
Good. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Mahesh.
Thank you. All right, so let's back to our next session. And Alan, we're going to stick around.
Yeah, that was a wonderful segment. Lots of learning as the day goes on. I feel prepared to start my own startup now. Well, almost.
That's great. That's great.
Almost. We still have one topic to cover. So then I'll be ready to start my own startup. So let's go ahead and introduce our next segment of how to build a successful go-to-market strategy. We will have Alan sticking around, and we are now introducing Nikita Sachdev. I hope I pronounced that right.
Nikita is not going to join us, so I think it'll be just me and Alan taking over this thing.
Oh, well, wonderful.
Yeah,
I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Break.
All right.
Here at McCarter, we create artificial, virtual, and mixed reality games and apps, voice-enabled skills and apps, and intelligent apps and integrate AI with IoT products. We offer advisory services for innovations and startups. We provide cloud and code security and performance services. We also offer AI/ML blockchain development, consulting, and training. Just visit www.mindcracker.us to make your dreams into a reality.
All right, we are back. Let's get Alan back. Let's find him where he is.
Hello.
Welcome back, Alan.
You're back, Alan.
I'm starting to think you two are the most expert on startups since you have been so frequently joining us today in almost every segment. So I'm excited to hear from the ultimate experts in our last segment today.
We've had the pain.
Right, pivot toward the pain.
Exactly. All right, so everybody joining us this session today. We're going to talk about marketing, right? That's another important part of a startup. Um, so, and I have some, we're not going to do decks, but in this, what we're going to talk about is, Alan, there are different kind of, marketing strategies, different pathways, and as a team, marketing team, you want to hire somebody, you want to do your own, you want to build your own team, all that combined. So let's start with, you want to share something about any startup you have done in marketing, then I'll share one which we did, and then we'll go break down this into, separate topics.
Sure. So I think you really have two types of customers, and depending on the type of customer that you have, determines what type of marketing you do. You're either going out to consumers, so you're a B2C, or you're going to a business and you're a B2B. And if you're maybe selling some kind of add-on to Visual Studio, JetBrains type thing, well, you're not a B2B, you're a B2C, because you're going out mostly to the consumer, the user of that piece of software. Maybe if you're a Twitter or a Facebook, you're a B2C, and a B2B, business to business, you're selling something directly to an enterprise. So if we're trying to, they always say that if you want to find out where your customer is, it's the same as if you're out in the Serengeti desert, you're out in the jungle or something, and you want to find out where are all those animals gone, where are the beasts, right? So you go and find out where they drink. You go to the watering hole and you find out where these people congregate and where do they hang around. In the case of consumers, nowadays it's reasonably easy to reach out to them on the social media, on Facebook and Twitter and those things, and to do some of that hyper targeting to get in. It's also important when you're going into both consumer and to B2B to ensure that you're hyper focused. So you're not just going there with a shotgun and saying, bang, we want to hit everybody, but you very, very tightly define down what your niche is. So your niche is not anybody who could use your product. Your niche is, and that you want to target, is the people who have the pain, who are looking for solutions to that pain, and who have the ability to influence the decision to make a purchase. You're not necessarily going out to target the people who are paying the money. You're going to target the people who can get you noticed within the company to the people who are actually going to pay the money. So when we talk about early adopters and beta testers, you have different types of buyers. You have the type of buyer who is only interested in a product if it is solid and it's perfect and it's mature. And then you have other buyers who are early adopters. So they're happy to come in and to influence the direction of the product. And you'll generally find that in the IT industry, you'll have a lot of people who are more inclined to be early adopters and sort of early geek users and everything else. And you should try and find, where's their watering hole? Where do they virtually drink? I don't mean where they go down and have a pint in the bar. I mean, where do they hang out? Where do they hang out online? Because everybody hangs out online. It could be the case that they even follow a certain influencer online. It could be the case that they read a certain journal or a certain magazine that's still actually sent physically. These things still happen in this world. Or it could be the case that they listen to their friends. And actually, the best recommendation, the best marketing you can do is to get one person word of mouth to recommend something to somebody else. So some of the tricks and things that you can do is you can learn tricks of psychological persuasion. So you're not only doing the broadcast, here's an advert, I hope people will buy it, but you're doing things like positioning. So you go off and you say, okay, I am going to put myself out there as an expert in a particular thing. So I'm selling these cool glasses. These are for my electronics, so I can look in at stuff in extreme detail. So I zoom down in here with these. Yeah. And it's got a little light that turns on, you see, and I can, look at circuit boards and things. So what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to identify that you're, or sorry, to make people identify you as an expert. And one way you can do that is to go out there, you write blog posts, you go to your good old community site like C# Community, you write articles, you talk, you speak, and you let people know your name. Because if somebody hears you talking about something, if somebody sees you writing a blog about something, someone hears somebody else interviewing you about something, you are automatically in their head an expert. You know more than they do about that particular subject. And if you then go to sell them something and they trust you as an expert, they will more likely purchase that thing from you. So when you're marketing, no matter whether it's small or big, one of the most important things to remember is you should always be building trust.
Yep. So back to that, right? So just let's hold on there. I want to spend a little more time on this, right? So if you're a startup or you have a product and you have your early customers or beta testers, some people, they believe in you. So I think, as you said, word of mouth is the best marketing, right? Means these people already believe in your product. And if your product is good enough, and that's where again Apple comes in, right? The way Apple build their products is that people who start using Apple product, they were so proud of owning the product, they were telling their friends, they were showing off like, look, I'm cool. So that cool factor came in, whatever, that's the reason they like the product. So Apple doesn't really had to really go and market a lot, because those cool people became their de facto brand ambassadors. Right?
Absolutely, they were their number one fan.
Yeah, there's number fan, and they become their, look at example of, I'll take this example of Microsoft, right? Microsoft has this group of MVPs, and there are a few thousand of those, and all they are is really early adopters. So these are the guys, they love Microsoft, they love Microsoft products, and Microsoft throws everything at them like, hey, check this out, see what this does, what is and they spend a lot of time and provide feedback back to Microsoft, and which is really a big program, and that's where they make their products better. And now once that product is launched, these MVPs are now talking about it, they're writing about it, they're selling to the customers, their customers. So that's kind of includes everything. It includes your good product, it includes your brand ambassadorship, it includes your selling. And Microsoft is not really even selling direct. So this kind of combines all of those marketing strategies which you just talked about.
Absolutely. And if you want to put a word on that, I think we could put a banner over that simply says two words: social proof.
There you go. So social proof is an important part of your marketing strategy. If you're a startup, try to get those, and again, we are focusing on a startup right now here. If you're a startup, you want to take your product out there, try to find, and it's hard, trust me, we have done that. Finding those early adapters who love your product is not that easy. Forget Microsoft and Apple, because they're already well established companies, but you're out there, nobody. It's going to take you probably 100 times effort to find those 100 people than anybody else. So okay, that's great. So that should be one of the strategies in startups, is that find those early influencers, right? Go ahead, let's talk about more other things. When you do, if you're a startup, how do you market your product, how you go to the people, what else next we have?
So one of the things that you can do as well is, you said, how do you get to the people? And we always go to the watering hole, go to where they're drinking, and go to where they're reading. And you say to yourself, okay, but there's that guy, there's that girl, and they have this great blog, and we know that like thousands of people read them every week. And the best that I can do is maybe go and I can start engaging with them. Because if I engage with them, and they engage back with me, that gives me social proof, and that raises my profile in their eyes, and then I can leverage that, and I can start to use that and hopefully partner with them. So I can go in, I can start commenting on their blog posts, I can start, if I'm following them on the LinkedIn, or if I'm following them on the Twitter, I can ask them questions, I can send replies back in. I can offer to go and interview them. I can offer to give them some free content. I can go in and I can say, hey, what can I do to help you in something, free of charge. And I've even seen people do some pretty weird stuff. Like, for example, there was a company and they wanted to get some journalists to write a story about them, some influencers and bloggers. And what they did was this is ridiculous, they had giant lobsters delivered to their house. Right now, I'm not talking about live lobsters. I'm talking about like big blow-up toys, right? So they had these like sort of a singogram or something, and they arrived up to wherever they knew that their place of work was, or if the influencer said, hey, everybody won't be around tonight, I'm going down to Joe's bar or to the pizza place or whatever, they would pay for a singogram or something to go along with this massive, big, huge blow-up lobster or a big giant fish, anything, just to get attention. And that broke the ice. That had a bit of fun of an element. And then the two connected and bang, they were off. So there was a guy, an old story I heard, and it was about salesman. And this particular salesman, he wore a huge, big fur coat all the time, right? Now, he wasn't like selling up in Eskimo land and up in Alaska or anything. He was selling in California. And my God, if you were wearing a fur coat in California, you either must be, like the world's most frozen person, or you must be like psychologically damaged, right? So someone said to this guy, he said, well, why do you always wear this like ridiculous big fur coat and you're sweating and sweltering and everything else, And he said, it's really simple. When I go into my customers and I want to sell my product, I'm the same as everybody else. I'm just another salesman. That's all I am. And that's all the customer sees. They just see this annoying person coming in to sell them stuff. However, when they see me coming, they remember me. They know that I'm different. And even if it's just something visual, something different, they've got to do something to make themselves stand out. And that's part of the key with marketing. No matter whether you're doing it on a macro level or a micro level, you must do something to stand out and position yourself as something that people want to remember and want to engage with.
So that's a good point. Be different, right? Come up with something, because there's so much out there already there, right? And I think I want to spend a little more time on things. You covered the writing blogs, being influencers, and all that. That kind of comes as I would say, content marketing, right? It's not a paid, because it's written by the people who love your product. But as a company, you can also build a paid marketing campaign for content marketing. You can pretty much hire these influencers, and all these days we call them Insta models or whatever. In Instagram, you can go and find the people who have thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of followers. For example, these if you have a sunscreen, you can find a model in California. She has 3 million followers, and what they do is they in their live videos on Instagram or other these social media platforms, they will show what product they are using, and they don't really need to promote the product where your camera is on the product what they are using. So that's probably also best, because if they're using it and I'm a follower, I would probably want to use that as well. So the part of that exclusivity, and also kind of indirect message, hidden message there, is that you don't have to blast the message, right? So you kind of have to you have to kind of prove your audience that I believe in this product, and that's all you got to do.
And that's really interesting as well, because that leads us then to market positioning, right? So, when you go out and you try and directly sell to somebody, they know you're selling, and people don't like being sold to, right? Whereas if you go out with the attitude of, actually, I don't need to sell to you. I don't even want to sell to you. In fact, my product is so exclusive, you probably couldn't afford my product, right? And anyway, I only sell one product every week. And I've already promised now for the next 5 weeks to somebody else, so you can't have it. Okay, so you're out of luck, right? So when you introduce this concept of exclusivity, like a club, if you remember when a lot of products, when they're starting off, they'll say, put your name on the waiting list, right? Now,
Yep.
it's not that they're blocked because they can't hold any more people. They're using the law of marketing scarcity. And
Yep.
they're saying, well, if we say to you there's a waiting list, you say, I want to join that. I want to join that list. If other people want on, I want on, right? So there's different strategies and tricks that you can use to get to market, such as, for example, saying, yeah, if you want to be on this, well, you have to wait because my thing is so exclusive, everybody wants it. Use a countdown. So you want,
Yep.
You're trying to sell your thing and you say, well, I'm only going to sell it at this price for the next 3 hours.
Yep.
But if you
So
say something, you must stick to it. You can't
Yep.
say in 3 hours, oh, it's going to go for another 3 hours.
yes. So back to this exclusivity, right? Look at the Facebook, right? Facebook was perfect example that initially they launched their platform. It was invitations only. You could not just go and register on Facebook. I remember that. And I was like, wow, that's the stupidest thing ever. I want to register, but they won't let me because the invitation has to come from a college. It was designed for colleges only in the beginning. That made it so wanted, like, oh, I really want it. And another example now, fast forward so many years, my son, he's into this basketball gear, and there's a company, I forgot, 3 Ball or whatever. They only have exclusive product and they will only sell it for 24 hours. And I remember they start doing for few products, and yesterday or this week he said they're gonna airdrop or whatever that term is they call it, only 1.5 million product, that's it. And they are all sold out in advance, and they're like double the cost of regular product price out there.
Yeah. And it's absolutely crazy. And then you have that particular industry, like the sneaker bot industry,
Yeah.
where people write bots to just go on. It's like the going out to buy, Ticketmaster ticket stuff, and it's actually the same. It's all about creating an image of scarcity, and if something is scarce, well, people want more of it, and if people want more of it, well, then you can charge more, right?
Yes.
And you can build up more of a community of people who have your product versus people who want your product, and then what you do is you have this very strange thing that Apple are extremely good at, and Steve Jobs was the master of it, which was teasing something. So you have a product tease. So you're about to release a product, you want to market it, but you don't want to say, hey, I've got these really like bizarre electronics glasses I want you to buy. What you do instead is you just go out and you maybe say, it's coming.
Yep.
And that's all you do, right? And then maybe the next week or the following day, you do a little reveal and you go, it's on the way or whatever, so that what you do is over time, you build up an element of want, of need, of what's the word there I'm searching for? It's the expectation, of something big to coming, and people want this. You're building excitement, and you're building a community of people who desire your product.
Yep.
And that's really interesting.
Yeah, in between they would do a leaked. They would leak something.
Yes.
So when you leak something, people desire, it just becomes a bigger news than just go and announce it.
Yeah, I mean, look, that awful person Trump is a classic example of this. You don't even have to say something that is true. You can just prime the truth, which is what it's called. You say,
Hey.
for example, I heard somebody told me that this is an amazing product that you have to go and get. I don't know. I've never seen this product, but I've heard about it.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, as long as you have the influencers, right? That's the important part. If the influencers who are saying that, that's the key.
That's it. And years ago, there was always certain things that marketer used years ago that can't be used anymore, and they would tell lies blatantly, and they would create this air of uncertainty and fear and doubt. Remember the FUD thing they used to talk about: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And because of the fact that the internet is now spread so wide and it's so deeply ingrained in everybody's lives, we can go and we can search for information, and we can find one thing that says something is black and another thing that says something is white, but there's always information and there's always an opinion out there. The thing is that if you're going to make a claim about your product, if you're going to market yourself based on something, don't pretend that you are something that you are not. Because one of the big things that has been found about marketing over the past sort of 7 to 10 or so years, especially in the internet world, is that it is incredibly easy to damage your brand. Incredibly easy. And it takes so much resources and money and effort to build a brand and to get a new customer, whereas to keep a customer is much cheaper and much easier. So never damage your brand by telling an untruth. And on the other hand, don't apologize for what you do either. You don't have to be all things to all men. You don't have to solve everybody's problems. Sometimes going out and saying and acknowledging, actually, my competitor over there is absolutely awesome at what they do. We really respect them, and we never want to do what they do because we couldn't do it because it's too big. But sometimes you don't need that level of bigness. You just need something that little bit smaller, and that's what we do. We do this one thing really, really well. We don't do what they do, but we can give you that 2 or 3% that you need, and you're our customer. So truthfulness is an incredibly important thing to remember when you're doing your marketing.
Yep, and then I agree. That's changed a lot. So well, looks like we're almost done with time. There's one more point I want to bring here is the partnerships, right? So I think partnerships play a major role when it comes to marketing, especially if you are ahead already in your product and you are kind of scaling. So let's talk a little bit, 2 minutes on partnership.
Sure. I think it used to be the case that everybody thought that they had to stand on their own and they had to be the best and they had to be the biggest. In fact, the most successful companies, the most successful rock stars, the most successful movie stars, the most successful media influencers are all people who cooperate with others in partnership. If you look at Apple, they are not the biggest and best because they have the best phone. They happen to have the biggest and best partnership with people who make apps to go onto their phone. They've got this massive partnership and ecosystem. It's exactly the same with Microsoft. They're not the biggest and the best because they have the biggest best of everything. It's because they have the biggest and best partnership of sellers and partners and integrators across the world to help this move. If you look at different singers, you'll find it became popular about probably about 12 years ago to see singers coming out and saying, well, here is Mahesh singing his new song, I Have a Cat with a Red Head, featuring the famous rapper Alan. Okay, so this featuring stuff became very, very important. And this is where partnering with people is incredibly important, not only for visibility and marketing, but also for the overall success of your organization. Because if you can go and you can say, my company doesn't just stand on its own, it stands in a community of other products that's supported by all of these different people. Not only can you leverage the power of the partnership in your business, but also then in your marketing. And we see this time and time again where Microsoft products, for example, are continuously co-branded and co-marketed with other people. Standing together is much stronger than standing alone, because not only do you promote your own business, but you are improving your own brand by standing with somebody else's brand, and together you're stronger. Any community is the same. Together you're stronger.
Well said. Together you're stronger. The very good point here. I think we are good with the timing now. I think thank you so much everybody for joining. Now we have one last more session to go in this conference, and that will be followed by panel. So May, you want to jump in and then bring everybody to the
Hello.
panel? Hey guys,
Hey.
we are back.
How was your dentist appointment?
Quick and easy. They were just taking a scan to make a mouth guard, you know, and it's really cool because my dentist was the first dentist in San Diego to get this machine that they stick this thing in your mouth and it takes a 3D picture of your teeth.
Wow.
It's awesome. They don't do impressions anymore. They just do a 3D picture of your mouth. They send it off to a computer, and they make it right there at the dentist. Right? Yeah.
Sounds like whoever.
They know who they have. They have a rock star there. They better have all those.
So the next thing is going to be some kind of HoloLens where I can like be here in Ireland, and somebody can put this wand in your mouth, and I can be like, you know, like inside your mouth, looking around like a giant universe.
Yeah.
That's coming.
That's next.
Coming.
But my dentist does everything in house now because of that machine. He does all the crowns and all that kind of stuff there, you know, because of that. Yeah.
Let me throw in this here because it's very relevant. It's interesting because what you're basically saying is that your dentist does everything in house and they 3D print stuff. Okay. Those of us who are geeks will remember, you know, there's types of Star Trek and stuff, and you had the replicator when everything was printed, right? And I want to go back to something that one of the best entrepreneurs the world has ever seen, which is Bill Gates said many years ago, and it's very, 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 very relevant to startups. And he said, never forget that it is very, very easy to overestimate what you can do in 1 month or 1 year, but underestimate what you can achieve in 5. And that's very, very, very important. It's very easy to try and cram too much into now, but not to envisage what you can actually do over 3 or 5 years. So always think about the long game, not just about the now.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, good point.
That's a good point.
All right, so guys, this is the in panel. Let's do welcome everybody who's joining us. This panel will take some questions. If you have any questions about startups, feel free to post in the comments. May, you gonna lead the questions?
Sure. So our first question here from John Peters says, how do you price the product?
All right. So yeah, go ahead. You want to take Alan on that?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Product pricing is both a science and an art, and I will think of it as I go on, and I'll post it when somebody else is talking. I'll go to my bookshelf and get it. There's an ebook that you can download for free. That was written by, I think, some of the guys in Redgate, and it talks about this. And the bottom line is this: if you're doing a B2B, right? If you're doing some kind of software thing, and you want to sell to a company, you basically want to say to yourself, what is the value to the company of this product? Is it saving somebody time? Is it allowing somebody to be replaced and for their job to be moved off elsewhere? Are you allowing them to make additional savings or to make some extra profit? And you must quantify what that is, and then you sell your product in at slightly less than that. Right? And that's the bottom line, right? There's a science to it, but that's the bottom line. The most important thing to realize is that you do not forget never to undersell your product. Okay, everything has value. If you sell your product too low, well, then people will lose respect for you and for your product. Your product has value. I remember somebody saying one time, we went into a meeting and the customer said, "Wow, but your product is so expensive." And he said, yes, well, you can think of me as the Rolls Royce of whatever product it was. Okay. So he was positioning himself instantly as the premier product in that league. And he was making zero apologies for the price he was charging. Oh, yes. So what you do is go off, and I want you to either Bing or Google or whatever your search engine of choice is for a book called Don't Roll the Dice. And it's a free book. You can download it by it's an ebook. So Don't Roll the Dice. And I'll put a link up here that the guys
Yeah,
can
and
put later on.
to add to that, when you say you are premium product, you gotta also make sure you kind of back that up with your product quality. Uh, that's kind of important, right? If you're selling Rolls Royce, make sure it drives like that, it has luxury like that. You can't be repackaging Hyundai or Tata into Rolls Royce.
Yeah, yeah. Stephen, I've put the link in there to get that free PDF. It was written by Neil Davidson, one of the founders of that great company in the UK, Redgate, who makes such amazing products. So if you want to share that, and you can go and you can download a free PDF, and it gives you excellent insight in how to price your product.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I actually have a question that's a little sort of similar. Sort of related to startups, but a little bit just for the upcoming holiday of Halloween, if you're in the United States. If each of you had to dress up as a Halloween costume that was related to startups, what would you be?
All right, David, you want to start?
Well, I need some time to think about that one.
I'm gonna be the yoga guy. That's what I'll be.
I would be a pussycat. And the reason I would be a pussycat is that nobody wants to harm a pussycat, and I look soft and gentle and attractive, and I'm not threatening, and everybody wants to hug a pussycat. Okay. Whereas if I was coming in as a dragon, everybody would run away from you and everything else. So my kind of thinking behind it is make yourself and your company and your product and your team attractive. Not necessarily just because I'm so handsome, I know that. I mean, make it that it is attractive to use, it is attractive to people want to engage with you and they want to engage with your product. So that's what I mean. Make yourself attractive. Be a pussycat.
Yep.
Right. That's a great analogy.
To add to that, I wanna be the skeleton means you gotta, as a startup, you gotta have as low fat as you can. Fat doesn't work with the startups. You gotta
Brilliant.
be lean.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that skeleton needs more meat on the bones there. Yeah, I think I'm going to fall back to what I wear when I speak at C Sharp Corner is my rock star outfit. So I get, well, not this year, but every other year I get to dress up multiple times a year for Halloween because of my rock star outfit. So
there you go.
It's good that you say that because, again, just drawing it back to the whole startup thing, right? A very important thing, and everybody's heard it, but it's really true in startups, is fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you portray that you're successful, people will perceive it, and people want to be with successful people and successful companies and successful products. So, Dave, rock star away.
Yeah, and to add to Dave, your point, right? Dave is like, one of the key with the startups is when you're selling, you gotta separate yourself, right? You gotta look different. You gotta brand different. So everybody knows Dave because if there's one rock star speaker in tech, that's Dave.
well,
Nobody knows us. Everybody else like whatever.
well, that actually reminds me of a story that I haven't thought about in a long time, where I was working for this startup arm of a different company north of me a little bit. And what I built was, I think I built the very first horse wagering application ever, right? And I was, connected to the New York the betting thing, and I was betting thousands of dollars, fake dollars, to test the program and everything. But anyway, there's this big show that we needed to attend in Tucson, Arizona, which is not too far from here. It's about 6-7 hours away. And before that, I worked 40 straight days. Even through Thanksgiving, I worked on Thanksgiving to get the product ready for this demo at the show in Tucson. So I was the only developer. It was so me and my boss, went to Tucson in a van with all of our computer gear. And I actually took my computer gear and set it up in my hotel room because I still had to do some coding before the show started, right? But anyway, because I worked for 40 straight days, I was horribly ill. I was really, really sick, with some terrible flu because my immunity was down. So I was just hiding in my hotel room coding while my boss was downstairs, showing the product. And my boss calls up to me and says, "Dave, we want you to come down to the floor." And I go, no, I'm sick. You don't want me down there. I'm sick. I have long hair and a ponytail, and I might scare away some customers. And he goes, "No, that's exactly why we want you here, because you have long hair and a ponytail. You look like a developer," and so I had to go down there and talk to the customers and things like that. But that was a pretty big thing for me to realize that me growing my hair actually helps.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I really like all of your takes on how you would turn a startup into a Halloween costume. One thing I was thinking of is someone mentioned the pivot towards the pain throughout the conference, and I think with Halloween there's a lot of fear associated, and that I was expecting answers like, "Oh, I'd be someone in pain," or something like that related to startups. But I really liked all of your interpretations. So the next question I have is related to startups that aren't kind of internet based. Are there modern startups these days that aren't centered around software development, or are those the most successful startups that have been seen as of late?
I think the bottom line is that code and software, IT-based startups are the cheapest to start. Yeah. And as somebody said there a while ago, they're the cheapest to fail, right? So it's never been as cheap to fail a business. In other words, to test an idea. You can't go out and get tools and dies and molds and everything else made of some kind of manufacturing product for less than hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even if you've got some fancy 3D printer, you just can't do it. You can't start a biomedical startup cheaply. It's going to cost you millions and millions and millions. But startups, go to Azure and you just go like, file new website, bang, you're done. Yep. And you can do that in your free $25 turkey. So, I think that the ones that have visibility are the ones that are software, because you can fail them so fast and they can scale so fast. It's incredibly difficult to scale other types of businesses, and the margins in other types of businesses are nothing like you get in software. So it's a different game.
Yeah. To add to that, software startups have access to the entire world. So means you don't have just your city as a customer, you have 7.2 billion people as your potential customers.
And even now, there's 3 of us from different continents sitting here talking in real time to the world. Like, how are you going to do that if you're trying to sell a huge, big MRI machine? It's difficult.
Yeah. And, I'd like to piggyback a little bit on what Alan said is, just not a couple of kilometers away from me is a really big area in San Diego. San Diego has a lot of biotech startups. We have a lot. And I actually worked for one. I was in charge of all software development worldwide. And they work years before their product comes out, right? And so like Alan said, that's many, many millions of dollars because, especially at a biotech company, the scientists are not cheap. They're really expensive. They're a lot more expensive than software developers.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, it seems like the software startups are the easiest, most cost effective, and most successful.
Yep.
Simon, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add. I'm just going through my Twitter, and as Alan said that we are sitting from 3 different continents. I got a picture where me, Mahesh, and Alan, we all are sitting on a couch, right, back from 2016. I'll just go ahead and put it up, and I want Alan is just relaxing there. You see over there at the bottom.
I've been there.
Yeah, you came the other day, I remember, right? It was 2016, and that is my very first event at C# Corner, and that's where I met Mahesh, Sir, Anand, and you guys for the very first time. So
I am so handsome.
I remember you said the same thing that day too.
Look,
So
if I don't say it, nobody else will, so I have to keep saying it.
yeah,
There you go. That's one way to sell it.
Yeah.
Right.
Repeat it until Okay, we have a question, and I this is my favorite question. Is there is a question from P who says, how important is networking for stuff? And when I think startups, networking really, I think he means going, meeting people, partnerships, all that. Go ahead. I mean, I can just add, it's very important. Obviously, depending on what kind of startup you have. But for me, and David will be agree, or we all will agree, networking is probably one of the things that made us successful.
Yes, that's almost every job I've ever gotten, has come from networking, one way or the other, just about. And when I've done my surviving the technical interview session at C# Corner, that's one of the things I tell people is the number one way, to meet people, get jobs, make contacts is networking. You've got to do it.
And some of these guys can help you sell your product, promote it. If you like them, you become friend. It's all about, having more and more friends in your circle. If your goal is to.
Let me add a word of warning to this particular thing, right? And it's simply this. I have seen too many entrepreneurs who are in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And they are in love with the idea of having a startup. And they spend all of their time reading the recommended books and looking at the recommended TED Talks and going to all of the startup meetups and groups and everything else, and never producing a first minimal viable product.
Yeah.
There's a time for networking, there's a time for marketing, there's a time for business, there's a time for finance, but there's a time for getting started as well. And what you need to do if you want to get into the startup and to see if you can make it go is you need to put your foot down and take your first step. Stop talking, get doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agree. 100%. Yeah. You got to do it. And networking is more like part of, I would say, biz dev. It's not a part of the product team, or this is part of marketing team, right? You got to figure out how to network, meet people, get on board, sign up. End of the day, you can network, but you also have to close the deal.
Yeah.
Don't just do a lot of networking, because you can network with 1,000 people. If nobody's helping you grow the business, it's useless.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, never forget, at the end of the day, go to your customer and say, if I took away the product, would it cause you a problem?
Right.
Yeah.
No.
So I have a question to kind of piggyback off of that. What advice would you each give to someone who's early in the startup process who maybe doesn't know where to start networking?
I mean, first thing is, I would say if they don't know where to start,
Go and ask.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are some groups where startups people do hang out. There's a speaker usually come, and usually speakers are somebody who's successful. You look at who's speaking there. If somebody say, I know in Philadelphia sometimes, CEO of some famous startups, they sold for $1 billion. They go there as a speak. So try to meet them, and first thing I would say is get somebody who is who kind of mentor to you. That's kind of key for me.
Yeah.
The key message from me on this one here is simply ask, because people very strangely, people actually want to help, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So And the startup community is awesome for people who will help. So if you don't know where to network, if you don't know where to start, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, go on C# Corner community, go on the forum, go to a local whatever, and just say, hey guys, I'm new to this. I don't know where to start. Where should I start? What should I do? And guess what? People will give you advice. It's awesome.
Yep. That's true. People are willing to help. I was talking to someone yesterday about this, and it kind of stemmed from, I've gotten a comment many, many times in the 27 years I've been doing this is, Dave, how do you get so much free stuff? Like when I ran the user group, I was in charge of getting free stuff so we could, raffle it off at each meeting so we could raise money for the group. That's how we raised money. We didn't have dues. We gave away stuff. People bought tickets, and then, we would give it away. And people would say, well, how do you get all this stuff, Dave? And I go, I ask.
So
that's it.
I have a riddle to ask to all of you guys, 4 of you. What is that thing everybody wants to give, nobody wants to take?
Advice.
Advice.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe that was a bad question, but I think all of your
bad question.
I think all of your unwarranted advice, I'm sure, will help somebody out there.
Hope so.
Getting started. Another question I have, and I know this is probably dependent on, situation. Like, it's very situational, but what industries have you guys seen the most success with startups?
Well, that's a good question. That's a really good question. And I think industries kind of change every 5 years or so. So if I have to add right now, and everybody can chime in. Right now I'm seeing, obviously, in tech world, that's where I know the most, is cloud is big, AI, machine learning is growing, and then speakers, smart speakers are growing, and smart homes and smart cars, that all comes under IoTs. So those are 2-3 big things are growing big time, and they're going to continue to grow more on for years.
Yeah, I would the thing that always comes to my mind when people say that to me, and I've even talked about this in the classes I've taught at the university, is medical, right? Medical industry is exploding just like the software industry is exploding. To me, these are the 2 biggest growth areas to look at. If you want to be a software engineer, you're golden. If you want to go into medical career, you're golden. So if you're going to start a startup, a software startup, I would look at medical, because there's a huge need, and I'm sure it's not being met right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And like I said earlier in my talk, that the medical software I do see, like at my dentist's office, they don't like. So
right.
Alan?
Interestingly, if I were to put money on something right now, I would put it on e-commerce, because of our unfortunate current situation with the pandemic worldwide. We've seen an absolute explosion of everything to do with e-commerce in all facets of it, from the online selling to the analytics to the routing of delivery to the end-to-end delivery chain, to the optimization of customer personalization, yada, 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 yada. Anything to do with e-commerce right now, like Dave said about medical, is again absolutely golden. And actually, if you want to just step back a bit further and look at what Dave said and what I'm saying, actually anything that helps to bridge the gap that we previously had, whereby we had to physically do things, and now to assist remote, not only remote working, remote healthcare, remote mental health, remote communities, all of these things are absolutely exploding. And one of the interesting outcomes of the pandemic is the realization for companies that they don't actually have to have these huge physical presences anymore. They don't need to have all of their people congregate into a city Another place that if I had a lot of money right now to invest would be probably in sort of satellite hot desk type places where people could commingle in small groups, but still come together as a company now and again if they needed to, etc., etc.
So that's perfect to segue to this answer to this question right here. Can you suggest me the most, what will be the most popular startup coming in years? So guess what? If you build a e-commerce platform for healthcare industry, and that's hosted on cloud and uses machine learning and AI.
Well, wait, you're giving away our idea. Come on.
That's it.
We shouldn't have done this publicly.
This is it. It's all done. It's gone.
But like Mahesh said earlier on, no one's going to steal your idea.
Yeah.
No. The bottom line, okay, here's one thing that I really want to tell you guys, right? And it's something that I learned a long time ago, and it's so important. Ideas are cheap. Ideas are 10 a penny. They're common. What is not common is execution. If you want to have a startup that is going to be successful, and people think of success at different levels. Success can be something that just literally pays your bills every week, or it can be multi-millions. It doesn't matter. It's whatever success means to you. Talk is cheap. Ideas are cheap. Execution is what matters. So if you want to get yourself into a startup, do all the things that we talk about, shut up and start doing.
Yeah,
So you're telling people to stop watching this show? we better
Stop
close
watching.
down soon.
Go code. Feel the pain. Go code.
They all gonna leave and they all gonna go and start working.
yeah. Well, Alan, what you said kind of reminded me of something that I invented in my head Saturday, and while I was playing guitar. And I discovered something I'm not going to say publicly, but I almost instantly came up with a new guitar product, right? And I've already researched it. It doesn't exist. That's the first thing I tell people when they have an idea like for a startup and stuff. I say, go see if it's already done, right? Because if it's already done, and especially done by multiple people, it might not be a great thing to start, right? Because people are ahead of you. But anyway, I invented in my head a brand new type of guitar sustainer. And Alan knows what that means, right? And what a guitar sustainer basically is, when you pluck a string on a guitar, that vibration lasts about a minute if you don't pluck it again, right? What a sustainer does is make that last longer, right? And many great guitarists use that, even Grammy-winning guitars use these kind of things. So I actually have one. I have a handheld one that I use on a couple songs, but I came up with a new one that is even better. And I actually went in my my loft yesterday looking for things I could use to build the prototype. And this is what I was trying to say, what Alan was saying. I'm already looking at building the prototype. I already have,
folks. The Kickstarter is next.
Yeah. But I have the whole. I designed the whole thing in my head. I know exactly what I need. I just need to go buy the parts and put it together to see if my idea is really going to work, right?
All right.
And if it does, then maybe Kickstarter or something like that. We'll see. But
Yeah. You gotta build the MVP first.
But I'm going to build it for me first, and then we'll see.
Yep. All right. We have more questions.
No, I think we're good. From the comments.
All right, guys. Looks like we have covered everything. This was great. I know Simon is like, guys, can we get the heck out of here? I want to see.
Let's go to bed.
It's only
Simon,
11
what
at my
time is
place.
it? 11?
It's only 11, yeah.
So I think it was amazing, great work, guys. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. We are going to plan more conferences. I would say sometime in February, starting February. Just let you guys know. So one will be around consulting. That should be pretty good topic for all of us. because we all have done consulting for so long.
That's all I
Just
do.
focused on consulting, how to build your own consulting business, what do you look for, what not to look for, how to protect yourself, and so many other things. Anything? Go ahead. You guys want to say last word about last thing, and then May, you can close in the end.
Yeah, the last thing that I want to say is I said earlier on, people are willing to help and ask for help, and people will help you. And the flip side of that is go help yourself, right? So when somebody's asking for help, you know something, go tell them. Doesn't matter how stupid you think it is. They may think it's absolute gold. So help others. It's always important.
Yeah. My thing is just come up with the original idea and do it, and something you're really passionate about. I think, everything is better when you're really passionate about it, and that kind of makes me think back a little bit to what Alan was saying a little bit ago about, people that start startups just because they want to be famous. I kind of call them cheerleaders. They really don't do anything but go around cheerleading, and so don't do that. Come up with something you're really passionate about and do it, and find other people that have the same passion. That's what happened when I was working for startups. We all had the same passion for what we were doing.
The one last thing I'm going to say on this is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
You do not need to have something completely and utterly unique. Sometimes, a lot of times, what you hear as first mover advantage is actually a disadvantage, because you have to do all the work to figure out exactly what the route is to get that thing to market. Somebody comes behind you, they learn from your pain, they actually take your pain and they improve on it, and they get second mover advantage, which is far more valuable than first mover advantage. So a lot of times you don't have to come up with a new idea, you just have to do something better than somebody else.
Right. Yeah. Don't do it the same thing. You're just wasting your time.
Whatever you're going to do, just make sure that you're the best at it. That's all.
Right. We don't need another Facebook, right? We need something different.
Maybe it's Facebook for guitarists who come up with ideas that, like, how to stay notes longer.
The build sustainers, right?
Yeah. Okay. Are we done?
Yeah.
Simon, you want to add last words, and then May will end it.
For my last word would be, as I said, go and ask for help. Thank you so much for everyone joining in the last moment, right? It was on a very short notice, so we reached out for the help. So thank you for the help. Really appreciate it. You both are the guys we always look up for, right? And thank you so much. And looking forward to meet you next year, both in person and in the virtual conferences.
In Europe.
Yeah, in Europe. Yeah. Yeah, it would be great to go ahead to Europe and London and Ireland too. That would be great.
Don't forget,
we're not going to do Irish stew.
Oh my god! I just Googled it, right?
And don't forget to watch my show tomorrow. Oh, sorry. Yeah, everybody, don't forget to watch my show tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
Rockin' the Cold World with Donna Dave.
Yeah, and we're coming with Alan's show too. That's about non-tech, non-code guys. That's interesting too.
Oh yeah, we're going to do it. We're getting together a show as well. It's called After Code, and it's going to talk to folk about stuff they do when they're finished coding, right? So Mahesh is going to talk about what relaxes him with cuisine. I'm going to talk about woodworking and some robotics and stuff. I've got a guy who's going to come on. He's an IT pro. He's going to talk about beekeeping and how not to get stung by 1,000 angry bees. And then we've got an amazing guy as well who's going to come on, and he's going to talk to us all about eco-house building. And he's a very impressive architect. So it'd be interesting to see his skills transfer from the IT side to the physical side. So if you guys watching, guys and girls, have an interesting hobby on the side, something you'd like to talk about, please reach out to any of us here, and we'd love to have you on and start talk to you about on that as well. So over to you.
Alan, did you see my new art project that I've launched?
I didn't, but I'm sure you'll show it to me later.
Yeah,
it's all about your secret to your sustainer.
Yeah, other things, and I'm creating art, and so I showed the first one I think last week. And so that's kind of my passion right now. Besides guitar playing, is I'm getting back into doing art, which I've been doing ever since grade school. So
Get in the line. Get in the line, definitely.
yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here and speaking and sharing your wisdom with us about startups. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience members did as well. Thank you to Simon for doing all of the backstage stuff.
Me and my team, yeah. Me and my team.
You and
Amazing
your team. Yeah, keeping the conference going, and thank you to Mahesh for hosting and sharing as well. So I look forward to seeing you guys next year, hopefully in person.
Thank you all, and thank you marketing team, the guys who are posting on social media. There's a few guys still awake. They're working non-stop and doing all the social media work, marketing work. Thank you all. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
Halloween.
TGIF.